It is Thursday night, East Lansing, Michigan. Come on in, gather around, gather around, gather around. My name is Jim Comparoni, publisher, SpartanMag.com, part of the On3 network. Come on in, gather around. Going to talk Michigan State football, some recruiting, and of course basketball. Basketball, very hot topic right now, Michigan State basketball. Tough loss earlier this week at Minnesota. Looked really good for about 30 minutes, had that game won. Well, didn't really have it won, but in position to get a big win on the road. This time of year, when you have a record like Michigan State, every win is a big one, every loss is a big one in Michigan State. 14-9 now, 6-6 in the Big Ten. I was at Michigan State's basketball practice just a few hours ago. Tom Izzo spoke after practice. We've got that video here on the Underground, actually here on the SpartanMag.com YouTube channel. Go over there and check it out when you get a chance. About 5 minutes, Izzo had to run. He and the staff were flying down to Maryland to watch Cam Ward. He's a 2025 top 50 recruit in Maryland. It's my understanding everybody, the whole staff was going. Izzo, Montgomery, Kelly, Wojcik, they're all going down there to have a big show of support for him. Getting in on him seriously here lately. Notre Dame's in there and a few others. He was at the Michigan State-Maryland basketball game a few weeks ago, and there was a feeling that he was more so watching Michigan State than Maryland, although he's a home state Maryland kid. Michigan State with a strong presence there tonight. That was the plan when they left practice, and they left practice abruptly. The interview with Izzo tonight, only about 5 minutes. He had to go. And if you're wondering where he had to go, it's recruiting time. Now he's probably on his way back by now. Another practice on Friday. Big game against Illinois on Saturday. The Illini, they're terrific. They've got Terrence Shannon back. They don't really have a true point guard on that team, but you remember when Michigan State played there a few weeks ago. They've got size and shot-making skill everywhere. Where do they rank? Number 9 in the country right now. Illinois, 17-5. Izzo today. Izzo, he loves a good competitive matchup, and they were working hard on things to get ready for Illinois. I can't say specifically what was going on because I was there, and the understanding is when they send out an invitation to media to go to practice, you're not allowed to write about anything specifically going on in practice unless the coach talks about it. For instance, Izzo was asked today about Tyson Walker being held out of practice to an extent. I mean, he was dressed, he was out there, he was going through some walkthrough stuff, but they were holding him out of the ward drill, holding him out of some ball screen coverage things and other things. And he was asked about it, and he kind of sheepishly said, "Well, didn't you see? Yeah, we held him out, but in order for media to write about it, he has to comment on it first." If he would have said, "Hey, yeah, he was out, but I prefer you not report that," which he's never done about injuries. He's never really hid from injury information too much. But anyway, watched practice. It was intense. It was focused. This is a team that, once again, is against the ropes a little bit. And Izzo's teams are no stranger to the ropes. They've been on the ropes since mid-December when they played Baylor at Little Caesars Arena. They were getting in close to must-win situation at that time. Won that game. Then they had Indiana State visiting. They could not afford to lose a game at home to Indiana State. Now, Indiana State's 20-3 right now, getting a lot of starting to get some national attention. Still only going to be a 12 or 11 seed, but Indiana State's terrific. Michigan State had to win that game. If they'd have lost those two games, the hole would be even bigger to dig out of right now. As it stands, Michigan State is really strong in a lot of the metrics, KenPom and those type of things, because they beat Indiana State and Baylor and Butler. And that looks pretty good right now, but 6-6 in the Big Ten doesn't look so good. Izzo made the point today that they had won, 10 out of 13 with a chance to go 11 out of 14. And the difference between those two would be enormous if they were sitting at 15-8 right now, 7-5. They would feel like they've got their head above water a little bit, could continue to work on things and try to pad their seeding heading toward the NCAA tournament. Instead, they lose that game. Now they're back for the moment on the bubble. They have winnable games coming up, but they're running out of chips. You can't lose any more chips. They lost a chip the other night. I know Minnesota's good, might be an NCAA tournament team, but that's a chip they lost. They can't be losing any chips at Penn State, at Michigan, home against Ohio State, home against, who else is visiting? Ohio State, Iowa. Can't lose those games. You're running out of chips. In the meantime, you can gain chips this weekend with a big game against Illinois, the only top 10 team visiting Michigan State at Breslin Center this year, although Wisconsin's been a top 10 team. They were not top 10 when they visited Illinois coming off an overtime victory over Nebraska, 87-84. Prior to that, they won at Ohio State and they lost at Northwestern. So Illinois is 3-3 on the road in the Big Ten. Some of those losses were without Terrence Shannon. They have Terrence Shannon back. He's had some legal trouble off the court. Shannon against Nebraska would have about 20 points, 6 out of 16, 3 out of 10 from three-point range. Coleman Hawkins is kind of the X factor for me. When he's hitting shots from deep, it just gives them more dimensions. He plays the 5, and when they've got the center out there hitting three-pointers, it's a difference. He had 20 points against Nebraska. He was 4 out of 7 from three-point range. Hawkins is a good shooter. So matchup questions, who do you put on him? In the first meeting, Michigan State guarded Hawkins with guards. They were switching 4 pretty much. Sometimes Jaden Akins was on him. So the center for Michigan State was guarding Ty Rodgers because Ty Rodgers is less of a shooter than the other 4. But Ty Rodgers rose up and hit some open 15, 16-footers, went right at Sissoko. I'm not sure Sissoko was exactly carrying out how they wanted that defense to be done there in that first game. This game, I was at practice. I can't really talk about what was going on today. If I had not been at practice or it had been closed, I could theorize a little bit more about matchups and so forth, but can't really talk about it right now. That's just kind of the way the access situation goes. If you go to practice and start talking about what goes on in practice, you're allowed to do that, but then it's going to be closed for everybody for the rest of the year. So it's one of those type of deals. So, Ty Rodgers, Grand Blanc, Michigan, 14 rebounds earlier this week, actually last week against Nebraska. Illinois, very good team. Height, range, and big athletic frames all over the place, and they get a week off. That's the part that bothers Izzo the most, because Izzo would really like to dig into this deeply, and of course it is a rematch, so do they do things the same, differently? What kind of things are they working on? He would love to have more practices. Had a very spirited practice today. As Izzo says, they have a day and a half to get ready for this. They played late Tuesday night, so Wednesday, I don't know if they practiced on Wednesday or not, might not have, probably didn't. Got back late. Probably had some film sessions on Wednesday, practice today, they'll practice Friday, then they have to play. Illinois has a whole week off. It's an advantage for them. I think Maryland had the same thing when they came to Michigan State, had a week off. Michigan State workmen slogged through that game. That was a big win against Maryland, set them up to go on the road to do more damage on the road against Minnesota, and it was looking really good for about 30 minutes, and then it got away. Credit to Minnesota at home, making some good shots, playing some defense. Got it done. Michigan State's offense, as everybody knows, went stagnant. Izzo spoke about that earlier today. Was not happy with quarterbacking and point guard play. We spoke with A.J. Hoggard after practice today. They're trying to make corrections. I wrote about that at length Tuesday night for Wednesday morning. Izzo was very demanding of Hoggard. I was a little more defensive of Hoggard. I thought Hoggard was just trying. He was doing what he thought was best to help the team. He's got a lot of self-belief, and he's had a lot of times in his career where he's driven and gotten some difficult shots. But in those days, he had Joey Hauser out there at the 4. It's a little bit clearer to the rim than it is now. You see the help at the rim. A little more. He's always been pretty good at traffic, through contact, high glassers, but the traffic's a little more condensed now. Why? Because you don't have that stretch 4. It's a big thing for Michigan State. All right, everybody, let's gather around. Let's talk some football. Give me 10 seconds. I got to make a little adjustment over here. It's always football season at SpartanMag.com, but we do love basketball season, interest-wise, intrigue-wise. And this season, Michigan State was supposed to contend for a Big Ten title. Has not turned out that way. Now they're trying to scratch and claw, get back into the NCAA tournament. If they can get into the tournament, which I think they will, barring loss of more chips forthcoming, I do think that they have played a brand of basketball that could lend itself to winning a couple of games and getting out of that first weekend. They've got some elements. Inconsistent this year. They've not harnessed it for long periods of time. They need more player development to come around. They need more urgency, more focus, better focus. And Izzo is one of the best at getting that accomplished in March. And that's a big reason why I still believe they've got a chance to do some things, but they've got a lot of work to do, and they'd put a lot of work in today. They're serious about it. It's a championship program. And don't close the door on them. We'll see what happens. I'm not going to sit here like I did 12 months ago and tell you they've got 16. I think last year I was stronger with my opinion, saying that they definitely were Sweet 16 material. I don't see Michigan State being there yet. They have to continue to develop on some things. Tyson Walker, in a lot of ways, he's dynamic, but it's harder for him this year. Hogard hasn't quite taken that jump, partly because of what they're surrounded by. And I've said it from the beginning, that stretch four needs to come through for them. And Malik Hall's doing some good things from 16 feet and in the post. But you saw in the Minnesota game, Minnesota started double teaming the post, took that part away. Hall shooting decently percentage-wise from three-point range up to 33%. Now that's good, but he's still not a shot mentality, not a shoot-first guy. And to really make that stretch four thing work, needs to be someone that not only shoots 33% or better, but also has a quick trigger and a shooter's mentality to keep things spread out and to be productive that way. And it's a lot to ask because there's not a lot of them out there like that. Well, there are a few, but Hall was hoping to develop into that, and he has worked on it, and that is still a work in progress with, 8 games to go. Let's go to the mailbag. By the way, this whole thing, if you're not familiar with what this is, SpartanMag.com, check it out. $1 for a month subscription, SpartanMag.com. You'll love it. You'll thank us later. You'll get a kick out of it. You'll become a magger, and we'll be happy that you became one, covering Michigan State football, basketball, winter football, which includes roster management going on right now. We've got some coverage of that coming up as we head towards spring practice. Recruiting all the time. This week was late signing day. Jason Killip did a great job covering that. Paul Konerdijk, as always, Noah Sprunger, Jake Laskawa, the whole cast and crew. And over the Underground Bunker message board, which is the church of what's happening now for Michigan State sports, the daily narrative on Michigan State sports. Over there at the Underground Bunker message board at SpartanMag.com, I ask Spartan Maggers from all over the globe to post questions. Mailbag style, we will answer them here for the masses. Spartan Mag Live. And those of you watching can comment about it and tell me where I'm wrong. We appreciate that also. Might even let people call in if they want to. Might do that. But first, let's get to the first question. Comes from Jay Bannon from Sterling Heights, Michigan. Jay Bannon, a longtime Spartan Mag subscriber, says, would I comment on the quality and the positions of the preferred walk-ons that Michigan State signed this week? And if you could make one change for the basketball team, what would it be? One change for the basketball team? I don't know if you mean like with the current roster, any changes therein, or if you mean make a change going forward for the future. I think one thing they're lacking, I've said from the beginning, going back to August, the stretch four, like I said a moment ago, how much they would miss that Joey Hauser component and how important the Joey Hauser component was in coming along last year that helped Michigan State go to the Sweet 16 of the year before late in the year, which helped Michigan State beat Davidson, get into the tournament, and, cause some trouble for Duke. It was a big component to help turn around the post-Cassius Winston era and make Michigan State dangerous the last 2 March is. And they were dangerous. And also... But one change, the other thing, so that they've sought the stretch four. That's what Malik Hall's trying to develop into. They've been working on it. It's been a little reluctant. It's been slow. He's done a lot of good things. That part of it, if he could also be a 39% three-point shooter from deep with a quicker release and a shot mentality, then you're not only just like a solid role player, then you're like second team all Big Ten, because that's so valuable. So it's a lot to ask. He's working on it. Good kid, doing his best. We'll have to wait and see. Xavier Booker down the road, can he be that type of guy? He's making progress. He looked pretty good the other night. Hey, against Minnesota, I thought Booker, 3 or 4 minutes, it was probably the best, most productive 3 or 4 minutes of basketball I've ever seen him play. And that includes high school and grassroots when he was putting up numbers and dunking, and you saw the highlight films and all those things. He still lacked a lot of basic basketball capabilities, but the height, the range, the leaping ability, the straight line speed, you're also seeing, I've said from the beginning that his lateral movement on defense is good. Some big guys don't have that lateral movement. Edong Ebok never quite developed that. Marquise Gray didn't quite have that. So it's not a given. I mean, Jackson Kohler has trouble with that. That's why Kohler has trouble getting on the field, is that lateral movement piece. Booker has the lateral movement. He's got a nice shot and very springy. We all know that. He's got to play harder. He's working on it. Command his space and all those things. But ran a side ball screen to the rim, fouled, hit both free throws. That was nice. Some of that ball screen defense was solid. He's getting there. 2 months ago, I thought that there was no chance he could play important minutes in important games. I'm leaving that door ajar now. I think it's possible. He's making progress. And, he and Hogard were taking shots after practice today, working on it, and Malik Hall. All the guys that you would want to keep practicing, after practice, they were doing it. He was doing extra film work. So I don't close the door on something like that happening. But it's hard to get development out of him and Cohen Carr, which they need, with the way this schedule has been, because going all the way back to that Baylor game, they've been painted into a corner in terms of needing victories, and they've needed victories in all these games, and almost all of them have been close. So it's been hard to get them on the court to get development. One of the roots to that is those schedules difficult in the non-conference. Schedules 2 or 3 difficult games more so than most teams do. Secondly, in the Big Ten, you're playing 20 conference games. That eats up a big portion of your schedule. 20 conference games bleeding into early December. So it's harder to get that development for players like that. Trying to get development out of them in practice. But if you had some more cupcakes in November and December, they might be further along now. I don't know. But anyway, what would I change? I think what they're lacking is like that 6'6", 6'7" wing forward who can also play really good defense. Give you a 33% shooter on the wing, transition, some medium range scorer, some good defense, can switch at the guard positions, and play good defense on a guy like Domask of Illinois or AJ Storr of Wisconsin. Those type of guys. They've got Kurtang coming in next year as a true freshman, going after Bryson Tucker at 6'6.5". For 2025, there's the shooter from Virginia. So they're looking for that height and range. Could Pierre Brooks have been that guy? Maybe, but just think there's a little bit of strain there and it just wasn't coming around. Would that have made a difference if he had stuck it out and if things had been smoothed out and ironed out better? Maybe. You needed some personality things to come through there as well. And that's kind of one of the things they're lacking. On defense, I watch Pierre Brooks now, and he looks like he's slimmed down. He looks motivated. He looks more motivated than he was at Michigan State. And part of the motivation is he probably wants to show Michigan State that he's better than that he's an excellent player and someone that could have helped Michigan State. I'm sure that's part of motivation. It's human nature, right? Looks pretty good. And that whole thing collapsed, and Michigan State could probably use. I know he's 6'5", but he could have played kind of that role. But if you had him right now, would you have been able to sign Cohen Carr? I'm not sure. That's how these things work. Question number 2. Oh, Jay Bannon also wanted to know, can I comment on the quality and the positions of the preferred walk-ons at Michigan State? Michigan State signed preferred walk-ons this week, 8 or 9 of them. Some interesting ones. Paul Konerdijk had an article about that at SpartanMag.com today. Kenny Jordan. I didn't mention Kenny Jordan. Kenny Jordan's also doing a real good job for us. We're glad to have him with us, and we could see an expanded role from him coming soon. Kenny Jordan also had an article detailing those walk-ons. And any roster changes with Michigan State football right now are interesting and intriguing and important as they switch from the Tucker era to the Jonathan Smith era. The walk-ons, interesting ones, and I'll get into that in a moment. But first, let's go over here and look at the comments area. Thomas Kohlberg says, hey, Comp, I've been working on my crossover, and I'm ready to roll. I'm glad to hear that. We need all you guys working on your game, working on your skills, being the best people you can be as fans. Heading toward March, got to work on your skills. Don't try to be a me guy. There's no me in team. Actually, there's a me in team. There's no I in team. But there's not room for everybody to be a superstar. So do what you can. And we got Thomas Kohlberg working on his crossover. He's a team player. That crossover to drive, draw, dish, create opportunities for others. That's what Thomas Kohlberg's trying to do. That's why he's the starting point guard tonight. Brad Fishenko checking in early from Austin. He's ready. He's got his drinking shoes on. He's ready to go from Austin, Texas. Brad Fishenko, one of our longtime supporters. Great to hear from Brad. And he's in early. I can tell Brad's pissed off. Excuse my language. I usually stay away from the harsh language. That's about as harsh as it gets usually. Unless I'm just trying to make a point. I really wasn't trying to make a point. That was recreational bad word. Pissed off used to be a bad word in the 70s. Damn used to be a bad word. You guys remember that? If you're old enough, you remember. Clark Merrier. That's not the way Clark pronounces his last name, but he's given us the go-ahead to pronounce it that way because he thinks it sounds great, and I do too. Clark Merrier, he's a starting 3. Fushenko, he's down low at the 4. He's our stretch 4. John Elke, he's got to be a big man. He sounds like a big man. We got ornery people tonight. I can feel it. Matthew Latham, he's our hockey guy. We're going to put him on the bench. Sorry, Matthew. You're a hockey guy. You're going to come in with goggles on, and you're going to bounce people around like Kurt Rambis. Who else? I know Rambis started for the Lakers, but we're going to utilize him as kind of a spaz off the bench. And Daniel Barry, Sports Highlights. And we're going to put Brian V as the 5th guy in the starting lineup. I don't know what Daniel Barry, Sports Highlights. I'm a little confused by that. Might not be an OKG. No, he probably is. But anyway, thanks for checking in, Old Tuck, the bell cow. It's always good to have Old Tuck around. Old Tuck, originally from Ludington, Michigan. He's checking in from beautiful, I think, Austin, Texas. Part of the old Seaway Conference. Always good to have Old Tuck. MSU Spartan from Wisconsin, ready to roll. Dr. Terrence Gibson. He says, I hope everyone is well. Happy Thursday. Ben Chi says, hi, comp. John Elke says, don't understand so many fans being down on Izzo. He's still a good coach, gets talent, and who could be a better motivator. I agree with that. I know there's a lot of people that are cranky about it, and I kind of lost my temper again late last night in a message board post over at the Final Forum message board at SpartanMag.com. And I'm getting kind of predictable that way. People know what I'm going to say, and I've said it. I'll say it here and there a little bit more, but I don't know if I'll say it much. But I say it every year. Been saying it every year for 25 years. Michigan State loses a couple games. And the common refrain that I hear is, this is just not up to the Spartan standard. Michigan State's had 4 straight bad years. 4 straight bad years? I remember 1986 when Scott Skiles took Michigan State to the Sweet 16. That was huge. He was a superstar. He was a hero. That team was heroic. Sweet 16. That was 86. That was the first Sweet 16 since 79. Seemed like a long time at that point, 7 years. Michigan State went to the Sweet 16 last year. That's bad basketball. I heard that term. Bad basketball for 4 years. Sweet 16 is bad basketball? Who the frick do you think you are? Kansas. Okay, Kansas goes to the Sweet 16 a lot. Duke does it a lot. Who else? Who's better than that? In Kansas, the embarrassment that they faced with the FBI probe and how Self was able to survive that, keep his job, and they won a national championship doing that. That was one of the poor marks of the NCAA. That's why Bruce Weber, former head coach at Kansas State, wore his hair long his last year as coach at Kansas State as a protest. So Kansas, good. Kansas, they're good. They won national title 2 years ago. Kansas, Duke's pretty good every year, right? UConn, you want to say UConn? UConn's good right now. 12 months ago, UConn with Danny Hurley was on the hot seat. He'd been there 4 years, had 0 NCAA tournament wins. And at this time last year, mid-January, they were like 5-5 in the Big East. And Hurley was on the hot seat. Hey, to his credit, they got it straightened out, went on a roll, won the NCAA tournament. Great. They've been good for 11 months. Plant a flag. And they did that. Raise a banner. That's good. They're number 1 in the country right now. Good. UConn is good. Prior to that, they missed out of the NCAA tournament a number of years. So who do you want to be? Purdue? Hey, Purdue's good. They might go a long way this year, and they should have went to the Final Four the year they lost to Virginia in the regional finals, and Virginia won the national title. Should have been Purdue's national title. But the truth is, Purdue's not been to the Final freaking Four since 1980. What's that, 44 goddamn years? And people are ripping about Michigan State, which went to the Sweet 16 last year, and was within 5 minutes going to the Sweet 16 the year before and beating Duke. That's bad basketball? Who the frick do you think you are? Kansas? Duke? We'll see what happens with Duke this year. Who else? Purdue, they lost in the first round of Fairleigh Dickinson last year. So, like I posted last night, if there's any fan base in any sport in the country that should have patience and some working knowledge about how these things come about, it should be Michigan State Spartan basketball fans. After 25 years of this, I don't know if they remember 2003, when they had all kinds of problems. You know, they were one and done in 2002. And really, in 2003, people were saying these things about Izzo. Man, I don't know. He doesn't have cleaves anymore. I don't know if he's any good. Been hearing this crap every year since 2003. I don't know about Izzo. Final Four. I don't know about Izzo, Final Four. I don't know about Izzo, Big Ten Championship. I don't know about Izzo, Final Four. I'm not promising it's going to happen this year, but like I said, if there's any fan base that should have patience to let things play out, it should be the Michigan State basketball fans, and I know a lot of you do, but a lot of you don't. So if those of you that don't, you can do whatever you want. I don't care. It's your life. You can be what you want. I'm just surprised by it. I'm not judging anybody. I guess I am. I usually don't like to judge people, but I will in this particular area. I don't know. I mean, who else is good? Tennessee's good this year, right? I mean, they've never been to the damn Final Four, ever. Illinois is good. They might go this year. They've never won a national title. They went to the Final Four, in 89, went to the Final Four in 2005, and that's it. Last year, they get bumped again, knocked off. Tennessee last year loses to Florida Atlantic in the second round, whatever it was. They beat Duke, right? Then they lost to Florida Atlantic. Tennessee's good. I'm just saying, which fan base is happy right now? North Carolina, they're good. They won a couple of games. They beat Duke. You know, they're off to their best start in the ACC in a few years. Then they went out and lost to Clemson. North Carolina did not go to the NCAA tournament last year. I know they're in the title game 2 years ago. Last year they're in the NIT. That's great. They've got a real good chance to be strong this year. But which team is good? Which fan base is satisfied? I meant UConn right now, like I said, but 12 months ago, he was on the hot seat. Well, I don't know. Who are the Blue Bloods? Indiana? UCLA? I don't think so. Louisville. How about that crew? What are they, 7-17 now? 7-14? Good thing they fired Mac. Mac had a real good year that went in the tournament. Then the next year, they were good during the COVID year, and the Cassius Winston year when there was no tournament. So he didn't get to play in it that year. The next year, they missed the tournament. Then the next year, had a little problem with an assistant coach, NCAA violations of some sort that involved something with a grad assistant, illegal using things here and there. Nothing really major. They fired him. It's a good thing Louisville did. Look where they are now. Who are the Blue Bloods? UCLA, Kentucky. Calipari's on the hot seat this year. Who'd they lose to? Did they lose to St. Peter's again last year? I can't remember. And nothing against Calipari per se, but tell me, who's good? Texas Tech, they had a new coach. They ran their guy out of last year, said some foul things, got rid of him, brought in a new coach this year. Hey, they looked good. Now they've lost 3 straight. I don't know, Baylor won a national title a couple years ago. They're good. Michigan State beat them. They're up and down. I don't know who's good. Which fan base is content right now? For Michigan State people, from a myopic point of view, you can sit and whine and suck your thumb and say, how come we're not 30-5 every year? We're Michigan State. We should be 30-5 every year. Michigan State's never done it this way. Rarely. Occasionally, they might go 30-5. But a lot of Izzo's teams, they struggle like this, and they struggle like this, and they struggle like this, and then they make runs later. That's the way they do it. And I would think that people would be aware of that and let it play out. I don't know if it's going to happen this year. 12 months ago, I was saying this exact same thing, and I was more confident that it was going to get worked out. I don't know. So who's good? North Carolina State? No, I'm just around the country. I mean, what? Syracuse, Georgetown, St. John's, Ohio State, Michigan. I don't know. Who's in the top 10? Wisconsin's good. They lose at Michigan last night. Who's consistently good, like had a good year last year and is having a good year this year? Up to where the standard that you think Michigan State should be. I don't know. All right, but Michigan State dropped that game to Minnesota. That was expensive, and that's what's gotten everybody cranky again. All right, so football. Walk-ons. So Michigan State, a day or so ago, Jackson McKegg was one of them from Canton, Michigan, 6'2", 220, running back. So the question is, would you comment on the quality and positions of the preferred walk-ons? So I'll go one by one. I was looking at their film today. I don't have their film up ready. If I'd have brought it along, I'm not sure any of them would have been really like eye-catchingly wow. but there's some solid guys in there. This guy, Jackson McKegg, running back, 6'2", 220. Ranked like number 78 player in Michigan. Offers from football, Butler, Marshall, Valpo. The thing about this guy, running back, very productive running back, he makes it like he's a one-cut guy, and he has good, you can see he's got good vision because he's cutting to daylight, and it's decisive, and it's north and south. Now, when he gets into the open, he does not have all the gears. He does not have great breakaway speed, but it reminds me of some of the walk-on running backs we've seen at Minnesota and Iowa over the years. And for what Michigan State's going to with Jonathan Smith, a lot of under center, inside zone, 2 tight ends, a lot of downhill physicality. This guy with one-cut vision, I can see why they liked him and picked him off as a walk-on candidate. Frankly, I think his high school film was better than Davion Prim's was. His high school film. Now, Prim had a good spring 2 years ago, apparently, because they were talking him up, but we never really saw evidence of that in the season. And I don't know. I think McKegg's, for what it's worth, I think his high school film's better than that. Different types of running backs, but McKegg is an interesting guy to have. I never saw Lloyd Clemens' high school film. If you remember Lloyd Clemens, walk-on from Pennsylvania, the year after Cedric Irvin went pro, Lloyd Clemens was just one cut downhill. And they made great use of that in 1999 when they had a 10-2 season. This current staff, I think, would like a guy like Lloyd Clemens. Jackson McKegg, bigger, taller maybe than Lloyd Clemens if he's actually 6'2", but McKegg is an interesting one. He looks like a good MAC running back. That's what a lot of these guys look like. They look like good MAC players. And you can use that when you're building a program. The kicker, Martin Connington, been committed to Oregon State, number 12 place kicker in the country by On3. I didn't watch any of his film, but these guys knew him at Oregon State and got him to flip. I don't know if he was committed to Oregon State. So walk on. Going to need a kicker after Jonathan Kim. This is the guy that's going to compete for it. Sounds like a good idea to me. I apologize about drinking water, but I got to keep my voice box together. Apologize about that. We go commercial free here, so I don't get a chance to move on and do that during a commercial break, so I apologize about that. The linebacker, Carter Enyard from St. Louis, Missouri, St. Louis Country Day High School, 6'2", 217. This is the guy that's kind of like the highest ranked of the walk-ons. Linebacker, he was previously committed to Kent State, top 30 player in Missouri. Productive statistically, 10 sacks, 20 tackles for loss, 75 tackles. When I look at him on film, he looks like a MAC linebacker. And again, you can make use of that. The film, I would say, if you go back and watch Cal Halliday's film, Halliday, smaller guys, shorter arms and stuff, but contact, instinctive. Halliday's been a solid college player. I'm not sure if Halliday had a great ceiling to aspire to, but just a hardworking guy that's gotten a lot out of his ability and pretty good player. And I liked Halliday's film at a small level in Pennsylvania. Enyard is taller, maybe not as much pop as that, not as athletic as an Antoine Simmons, but if you could boil down Halliday and Antoine Simmons, maybe that's what Enyard would be. Solid, pretty solid, runs okay. I think his film kind of looks like Nateote's junior film. You might remember Nateote was a 4-star guy, and I was like, yeah, he looks okay. I mean, his senior film was a little bit better. But the Nateote, nothing against Nateote, but the Nateote hype because of the rankings, I was never driving that train. Enyard, Michigan State needs some linebackers. They haven't recruited a lot of linebackers in recent years. So put him in the talent pool. And they obviously, I don't know all the particulars about what Michigan State did to go after him. Jason Killip had some articles about him, SpartanMag.com, but they must have really liked him to get him to flip from a commitment to a MAC school to walk on. They must have really liked him to go that far away from home to go after him. I've not gotten the whole story on that. And his film is pretty solid. Now, I was interested to look at this offensive lineman from Traverse City West, Kyle Brunan. Brunan, 6'4", 275, offers from Central Michigan Army and Columbia, 3.8 GPA. And offensive linemen are important. They're really important for a scout team, too. offensive line walk-ons are important for scout team. They're important to have around also when you're going through a transition during spring practice. A couple of years ago, you remember that Michigan State was not able to really practice and scrimmage full throttle in the spring because they only had like 6 offensive linemen available. They had a few guys that had graduated, a few guys that had gone to the portal, a few guys that were injured, and they couldn't really scrimmage. That really hurt the offense in the spring, and it hurt the defense too. The defense couldn't go against real blocking, play after play after play. What happened that year? Among other things, they were caught with no walk-on offensive linemen. So getting these guys to come into the program. The next year, they brought in some decent offensive linemen, one of which, number 75, was it Ben Nelson? Was that his name? Shows up at defensive tackle last year, needed him because they needed bodies, because as low as they'd been on offensive line, they're also low at defensive tackle. Trench cupboard accumulation was not great. So they got a little low in the trenches a couple of times. Bring in these walk-on offensive linemen. Not only is a walk-on maybe a potential guy that could help down the road, but also a guy that can help service your defense and help service your offense and scout team. Walk-on offensive linemen are underrated. This guy looks like a good walk-on offensive lineman. I'm not going to forecast that he'll be, a starter someday because I see him in the 2 deep. I wouldn't shut the door on him. This guy's 6'4", 275, low center of gravity at about 6'4", 275. And he has a mature build about him. Playing on offense, there were 2 turnovers on his highlight film. One was a fumble, and he turned and chased a guy down. One was an interception, turned and chased the guy down. He's got some horsepower, some straight line horsepower. Not the most natural knee bender guy. Plays right tackle for Traverse City West. And pass protection, doesn't really move like a Power 5 offensive tackle. Could he be a guard? Could he be a center? I don't know. I went back and looked at, he would have to be because he's not a tackle at this level. Michigan State's best walk-on offensive lineman right now is Evan Brunning. I don't know if Brunning's coming back this year or not. I don't know if he's got a year of eligibility left or not. From Oxford High School, was a good defensive lineman in high school, played some O-line too, came to Michigan State as a walk-on defensive lineman, and then made the move to offensive line because they needed him, and has stayed there, and he's kind of bounced around the second string the last year or so. And I'm thinking about current walk-ons to compare Kyle Brunin to. So I went back and looked at Evan Brunning's high school film at Oxford, and most of his high school highlight film was him at defensive line, defensive end. Was it more of a thin guy, maybe an inch taller? Maybe not an inch taller, but you didn't really see the offensive line thickness that he has now at 300 pounds. But he was an athletic defensive end type of guy for that level. Brunning was, and had the ability to move to offensive line. So it was it wasn't an apples to apples comparison. And I was trying to think of some others. Didn't really land on anybody, but there's a guy named Brian Grant from like East Grand Rapids that committed to Michigan State, 20 years or so ago, was a 4-star by the National Recruiting Advisor, had some MAC offers, came to Michigan State, and a lot of observers were interested to see what he would become. Never really amounted to much, might have bounced around the 3rd string a little bit, never really broke into the 2nd string. But that was back in an era where we didn't have a lot of film of those guys either. But in terms of some of the credentials, it reminds me of him a little bit. But up at Traverse City West, it's possible to be a good player and be a secret up there because you got to go there to get there. People aren't just passing through Traverse City. So, interesting one. I would also be interested to talk to Michigan State's coaches. I assume, I don't know if he camped there. I don't know if the previous recruiting aides that are still on the staff, if they clued them in on some of these guys or what was going on, but that's an interesting one. Also, tight end Charlie Baker from East Lansing High School. Saw him play basketball 2 weeks ago against Okemos. Heady guy, program guy, mindful guy. You can see that. He's a team guy. 6'5", 210, tight end. 55 catches this year for a good East Lansing team. 916 yards. Runs pretty well. There was a highlight of him running a post and accelerated into that post cut really nicely at 6'5", 210 for a teenager. And a guy who's 6'5", 210 at 18 years old, as he gets to be 19, 20, 21 years old, that body control for a lot of guys at that age with these frames, it becomes more and more fluid to them. So I think right now he runs pretty well. I think that at that frame, there's going to be more fluidity coming. Is he actually 6'5"? I don't know, maybe. I'll have to go watch them again. Maybe he is, but he's got some smooth hands, too. He's got some natural hands. You see him on an over route, go up with a high catch radius and accelerate through it. That's what I mean by natural hands and accelerating through it. I mean, he's not like a gazelle out there. He's 6'5", 210. He's a tight end. You're not expecting him to be, Christy Yamaguchi out there in terms of gracefulness, but he's got something. He's quick off the line of scrimmage, too. He's got some takeoff, initially getting into his route. A lot of times they use him as a blocker. They'll use him. I think it was him. Yeah, they use him on, because East Lansing does a lot of ground game, too. They'll use him on some counters with him as a lead blocker because he can move and find somebody and put a hat on him. Can turn the corner on that. He's kind of raw as a blocker, 210 pounds. There'll be some work to do there, but I don't know who else was in on Baker in terms of where else he could have went. And as a basketball player, he's on a really good team. They were number one in the state for a while. They've dropped a couple of games here lately. But Charlie Baker, he's got a good reputation around town. He's a worker. He hustles. He's solid. He's 5'10". He's got hands. Defensive lineman Mason Nickel out of Midland, Dow. 6'2", 265, 6'2". Offers from Ferris State, Saginaw Valley State, Michigan Tech. Ferris State's had a great team in recent years. They've turned out some NFL players here and there. This guy, defensive line, watching him, he reminds me of Maverick Hansen a little bit in high school. Now, Maverick Hansen, 2 inches taller, which makes a big difference. Because as Maverick Hansen continued to put more and more weight on, he got bigger and stronger, more mass, without becoming sloppy with his weight. So Maverick Hansen had that frame to put more on. He reminds me of Maverick. I'm trying to get it out of my head a little bit because he wears the same colors that Maverick did in high school. So I got to get that out of my head a little bit. At 6'2", 270, size-wise, he's a little bit more like Jonathan Strayhorn, who played defensive tackle early in the D'Antonio era. Mason Nickel's got some athleticism, and he's nimble enough to turn the corner. He's 3-time All-Conference, 12 sacks as a senior, played defensive end in high school at Midland, Dow. When he two gaps, you can see that low center of gravity, the way he can handle some people. So there's some strength there. At 6'2", can he comfortably add more and more weight? I'm not sure. Sometimes you see some of those guys, some of those defensive tackles that are 6'2", that just keep adding width and get up to 290, and they're comfortable with it. It'll be interesting to watch. I don't know, but interesting one for sure. Also coming out of Fenton, Michigan, Chris Piawasik at 6'2", 225. At Fenton, it's kind of played some defensive end. He considered himself a linebacker at 6'2", 225. Had offers from, I think, Siena Heights and Calvin College. And you see on some of his highlights, change of direction when he's unblocked, taking on zone read, change of direction to make a tackle. Some athleticism there to maybe be a linebacker type of guy. Does Rossi see him as a plugger, Brady Pretzliff type of guy in the middle? Maybe. Does he have the sideline-to-sideline speed? I'd have to watch more to see if he had some of that. At defensive end at 6'2", 225, you know who he reminds me of a little bit? Now, this is a tough comparison because the guy I'm going to compare him to was a walk-on, but he also set his school record for sacks. He just had a natural ability to turn the corner and get loose. But frame-wise, he's like Drew Beasley a little bit. Piawasik, 6'2", 225. Beasley, 6'2", 231. Beasley had some natural slipperiness to him, and Michigan State was very fortunate to get him as a walk-on. I mean, Beasley was at Warren De La Salle, which is one of the great programs in the state of Michigan, and he set the all-time record at De La Salle for sacks. And when you're doing that at De La Salle, that's big. That's heady company, right? So Beasley comes in, walk-on, becomes pretty good. Then he becomes really good, and he was a big part as a leader and everything else as a defensive end on that 2021 team. So Piawasik, that's a heady comparison for another walk-on. I mean, that's Beasley and Willekes are like the standard defensive end walk-ons, and that's rare. Michigan State had 2 of those guys back-to-back. Piawasik, his dad played at Michigan State. Offensive line, early 90s, battler. So this is a guy that grew up a Michigan State fan, and he'll be answering the bell. He'll be showing up. Interesting one to have in the program. Another interesting one, Easton Boggs, 6'6", 225. This is the first time I've ever watched scouting video of 8-man football pertaining to Michigan State. Commits to Michigan State as a walk-on. Played 8-man football at Lenawee Christian, which is near Adrian, Michigan, southern Michigan. They won an 8-man state title. State title game, he had 9 catches for 210 yards. I guess Liberty was interested. Hillsdale was interested. Hands-wise at 6'5", high points are pretty good, moves pretty well. He looks like he's lumbering around, but he's covering ground. And they're on film one time, he's got a nice little double move. I mean, you think he's just kind of lumbering around, then he puts a double move on some people. Now, I know he's not going against, Cincinnati Catholic League defensive backfield coverage or anything, but you watch him change direction. Mostly played split end, so blocking as a tight end is going to be really foreign for him. He's going to be a project in that regard. And you start thinking he's a little bit stiff, but then he has a nice release move, or he has a nice, he kind of runs an out cut and plants his foot and really runs a nice out cut. Looks stiff, and then he does something like that. There's one thing in his film where they're running a trap block, and he blocks a guy. He's a little bit high on that. He's 6'6", 225. He's going to have to learn to block. But comparison-wise, probably a lot like Evan Morris in high school. Evan Morris was 6'5", 205 in high school, and Ovid Elsey came to Michigan State as a punter and a kicker, and played some tight end, and eventually transitioned to tight end at Michigan State as a walk-on. That's kind of what Easton Boggs kind of is. Boggs might be, I don't know, a little bit bigger, a little more natural, of a higher catch radius maybe, but Morris came around as a blocker eventually. That's kind of what I think about those guys. All right, question number 2. That covers all the walk-ons. I might have missed one here and there. I don't know. Question 2, Fishin' Dave from Midland, Michigan. He says he's not on the ice in Moran today, so he's wondering any questions. He's wondering about any word on hockey recruiting, any ideas on how to make the basketball offense not go on long droughts. Hockey recruiting, I don't... I've heard a few things. I don't have any specifics. I know they're recruiting at a high level. They're going after a higher level guy than Michigan State's done in the previous 15 years for the second straight year. So I'm thinking more of the same, but I don't have any specifics for you. Matt Latham, let's see if he's got anything. But that's something to keep an eye on. I'm not seeing anything from Matt Latham on that. And, hockey recruiting is kind of strange because, I mean, you get commitments from guys when they're 15, 16, and a lot of programs will have like 14 commitments with the idea that only 9 are actually going to come to your school. Because as they turn 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, then when they're 18, you're like, no, we think you should go to USHL. So they go to USHL for a year. Then, you should stay in USHL for another year. Go another year. And by that time, they might decommit and go somewhere else. There have been some Michigan State commitments that did that. There was one that played at a high level. Was it out at Air Force? And then, I'm not going to try to brainstorm and try to remember some of those things. But hockey recruiting is strange that way. Because at the age of 18, they don't have to go to college. They've got other avenues, the USHL juniors, all the way up to the age of 20. So sometimes players get placed there. And a lot of times college programs recruit, of course, out of the USHL when they're 19 or 20. So it's strange. And then someone like Artie Levshunov comes out of nowhere last summer, one of the best 18-year-old defensemen in the world, and you're like, yeah, we'll take him. Now, Nightingale and his staff are very well respected in the industry by hockey advisors, general managers, and people that have a lot of input on the placement of high-level hockey prospects. Nothing against Danton Cole and what he was trying to do, but Danton Cole was a defensive style, which you can win championships with. Look at Quinnipiac. But it was not favored nation status from those people. Michigan was. Michigan had a run of first-round draft choices that John Calipari would be jealous of. Never won a title with them. But they had an amazing group of first-round draft choices the last couple of years. And they're still talented. So Minnesota's kind of that way too. Boston College to an extent. There's some others. Michigan State's getting into that category too. Now, can you play that way and play a responsible, accountable brand of hockey as well? That's what Nightingale's going for. And big series coming up this weekend, and we've got a question about that later. Other question from Fishin' Dave from Midland says, any ideas on how the basketball offense cannot go on long droughts? To ask Izzo about that, to him, so much of it comes down to execution and quarterback play. And he just smiled and said, we had some good film sessions yesterday. And you know, Izzo, it's all about Hogard. And Hogard has had some good moments this year. Last year had some really good moments. There's some strain back and forth. Played really well in some big moments against Marquette. I think Marquette. Some other games. Did he guard Boogie Ellis in the USC game? Was that his name? I forget these guys' names after Michigan State plays them. I would have thought that Hogard would have taken it up another level this year. He's worked at it, gotten better shape. Shot last year improved. This year it's kind of plateaued. Other things have plateaued. Nothing against him. He's worked pretty hard. I think Izzo would like to have more urgency and focus. So that's what they're working on. Seems to me that Michigan State, they'll play good basketball, win a few games, and then the focus light just kind of fogs out a little bit. From Hogard sometimes from Akins. And Akins good, shooting well, has good effort on defense here and there, but just kind of like fogs out. There was a play, I can't remember if it was the Maryland game. Might have been Maryland game where Michigan State double teamed, I think twice. And I think it was Reese, took the ball in the post, double team, threw it under the rim, layup. And both times Akins was the guy that was supposed to rotate down and take that. There's a problem with a ball screen involving Cooper one time. I don't know who ended up being at fault at that one on the Maryland game. I mean, but Akins has risen up and shot really well in some of these games also, too. He's got skill. He's got athleticism. But you can't take the bad with the good. As you get toward March, as Izzo says, the my bads have to be eradicated. You have to get over the my bads. My bads will get you beat, he says. And for good reason. Akins, you know, there's if he can get rid of those my bads, he can become a plus player, but he's not there yet. Now, in this game against Minnesota, there was a play. Let's see, which was it? Was it, I can't remember exactly when it was. This is in the second half. And it was a new play. Michigan State showed some and had success with some of them. Did not score on them, but would have. The play worked, but it didn't get finished. I mentioned it in the article I wrote a couple of days ago. I can't really remember when it took place, but it was at the time when things were stagnant on offense and Michigan State ran a new play. Usually they save their new plays to like the last 12 minutes of a game. And on this one, kind of came up with a tandem backcourt with Hall as a guard to begin the offensive set, threw it over to Akins in the left wing. Left wing, Hall comes over, side ball screen, and they did. Michigan State had success on the open side ball screens once to Cooper for a dunk. Once to Xavier Booker, gets fouled, hits a couple shots. Another time had Cooper open, but Hogard didn't get the ball to him. That was in the first half. Second half, side ball screen, and I'd have to go back and watch it again. I watched it once, but twice. I'd have to go back and watch it a third time to see if Minnesota changed anything on how they guarded those open side ball screen actions. But Michigan State was anticipating Minnesota's adjustment. So rather than screen pocket pass, side ball screen pocket pass, screen roll from the side, they got the screen, sent it to Sissoko, popping over to the top of the key, and then Sissoko was supposed to pass it to the roller, Hall. So Hall screen, roll, and he's not going to get the pass from Akins. He's going to get it from the other angle. And I've not seen Michigan State do that this year. I was talking to a Michigan State coach about that after practice as to whether it was brand new. It's not brand new. It's been in the playbook. But I hadn't seen it this year, and my memory's not as good as it used to be. I used to be really good at knowing that's the first time they've run that all year. I'm pretty confident in saying I've not noticed that. We'll say that. And part of it, the beginning of it was strange with Hall being, they come up in a tandem backcourt. Just for a brief second, it's like he's a guard initially. Anyway, the play was there. Hall breaks, and he's wide open. And if Sissoko had caught the pass, get it to him for a dunk, it would have been a dunk. New play. So something like that ends up looking stagnant. But what went wrong on that play is Akins on the left side gets the screen and throws the pass to Sissoko, and it's one-handed. It's casual, and it's not a sharp pass, and Sissoko pops out to get the pass, he's going to go touch pass to Hall. Instead of here, he's got to like jump up and get it. Defense reacts, and the play's done. Play's over. There's no. Izzo today after practice was talking about not only decisions but execution. That was an example of execution. It's a sloppy pass. It's a casual pass. Akins cares. He's a good kid. He's a good student. But things like that, he just kind of fogs out. That needs to tighten up so that this team can be everything it can be, so that he can be everything that it can be. Otherwise, you lose on the road to Minnesota. So Michigan State's like a lot of teams in the country. They can go lose to a Minnesota on the road, or like North Carolina, they can lose at home to Clemson, or like Wisconsin, they can go and lose at Michigan. There's a lot of teams like that. And some of the teams like that are going to get their crap together enough to go to the Final Four. My good friend Matt Dorsey, a guy whose opinion I really respect on all matters, posted something on the Final Four message board yesterday saying, you know what, forget about the streak of consecutive NCAA tournament games, seasons. Maybe it'd be better just to focus on developing your youth and getting Cohen Carr in there and Booker, and they might play better and it might be better for the future. I respectfully disagree with that. First of all, I think the streak is incredibly important. They've got the longest streak by one coach in the history of college basketball at one school. I think it's close to, maybe Kansas is ahead of them right now. Kansas didn't get, they should have been precluded from going to the NCAA tournament a couple of years ago, but NCAA just makes it up as they're going along. But Izzo, no one's done it this many straight years for one program like Izzo has. So I think the streak is precious. That's one thing. Secondly, so I think you keep trying to get in the NCAA tournament, obviously. It's not like you're going to lose to try to get a better draft pick. You try to get in the tournament, firstly. Secondly, to preserve the streak. Thirdly, if you get in and you start getting your crap together and you start playing better basketball, you've got a chance. It doesn't look like it right now, but there's going to be teams, maybe it won't happen this year. Maybe it's going to be like, maybe chalk will hold, but it's a field of 68. I think there's probably 34 teams that can make the Final Four this year. I mean, last year, Florida Atlantic made it. Florida Atlantic, San Diego State, Miami Hurricanes. This year, Miami Hurricanes, Larinaga had a sit-down strike the other night when they lost to Virginia. They only scored 38 points. They went out and bought a bunch of portal players the year before, went pretty good. Went out and bought a bunch of new ones this year. It's not going very good. Kansas State did a good job in the portal last year, went to the Elite Eight, beat Michigan State in overtime. I didn't like the way they played in a lot of ways, but they played well in that game. They earlier in the season, the shot selection, I just have trouble understanding what a good shot is these days in some ways. The game's kind of passed me by in that way. I'm like, that's a bad shot, goes in. That's a bad shot, misses. That's a bad shot, misses. 33% is productive, I guess. Everybody thinks they're, Steph Curry or something. I watched Kansas State do that last year when they were a top 10 team. I'm like, they are not a top 10 team. I was wrong. And as fate would have it, they played Michigan State. They cut back on some of that. A lot of that. They were, and that point guard was tremendous with his vision and the velocity of his passes right in the shooting pocket. Was good. Credit to them. Won the game. This year, things not going as well for Kansas State. However, they got that big win this week against Kansas. So now they're back potentially on the positive side of the bubble. We'll have to wait and see. But some of these teams that were storybook great last year, FAU, I don't know if FAU gets in the tournament this year. They had everybody back. Man, I watched FAU last year, Florida Atlantic, in the first round against Memphis. It was in Columbus. They played the same day that Michigan State played USC. And it was the worst NCAA tournament game I've ever seen live, played. Worst played game. It looked like an NIT game. It looked like something between NIT and YMCA ball. And I posted that. I'm like, this is terrible. Nothing against the players. They're trying. But this is terrible, I thought. And I've seen probably 300 NCAA tournament games live. That was the worst I've ever seen, easily. Hardaway thought that Memphis was getting ripped off. He threw a water bottle on the court at the end of the game. FAU, Then they go out and FAU beats Fairleigh Dickinson in the second round because Fairleigh Dickinson beat Purdue. So FAU goes to the Sweet 16. Then they beat Tennessee somehow. And I've never watched that game. I wanted to go back and watch that game to see how in the hell they beat Tennessee. I don't know. Tennessee couldn't shoot from what I understand. But Florida Atlantic is in the Elite Eight and they're playing Kansas State. And I'm like, these two teams are playing to go to the Final Four. I'm like, check please. I don't know this sport anymore, I guess. So the good news is that college basketball is random, more random than it's ever been. I don't know if that's good news or bad news. The good news as it pertains this year to Michigan State, Illinois, Wisconsin, Minnesota, I don't know, Clemson, Indiana State. Dude, I don't know. Texas Tech just lost 3 straight. I don't know where they stand. Creighton. 34 teams have a shot to go to the Final Four this year. Purdue, I mean, everybody's talking about them being one of the top 2 teams in the country. I was courtside when they lost to Fairleigh Dickinson. And with about 15 minutes to go, every time Fairleigh Dickinson scored, I was right along the baseline when Purdue would get the ball and take it out of bounds. And their eyes looked like this. They were scared. They were scared. And if they get in a tight game again early this year, it could happen to them. Or they could win the whole thing like Virginia did the year after they lost to the Retrievers. So point is, Michigan State might look disheveled and they haven't played 40 strong minutes of basketball all year other than the Baylor game. But if they can get a little better quarterback play, decision making, and that play I just described about Jaden Akins, and it was just one play, but it's happening. It happens too often. There was a big play. You know when Garcia hit the 3-pointer late for Minnesota? No, it was Christie. When Christie hit the 3-pointer when he was fouled and media timeout comes back, misses the free throw. Could have been a 4-point play. Christie hit, like 5 3-pointers, and there were a couple of them that Izzo was really mad about in terms of coverage and responsibilities. And on that one, Hogard just kind of fell asleep for a second. And I say that with all due respect because he's an excellent basketball player. And like I like to say with my disclaimer, he's better at basketball than I will ever be at anything. So I don't really enjoy criticizing players, especially college players. But college players these days are pros, and these guys are getting paid. And that's part of it too. It's part of it too. In terms of, keeping noses to the grindstone and focus and blinders on, there are different challenges now. On that play, Garcia drove, Hall flashed, and Akins came down. Akins very mindfully, 6 eyes of defense, essentially triple teamed him. And I can't remember if it was Cooper. Maybe Cooper flashed and Hall stepped down to take away the double team passed under the rim. It was shut off, and Hogard also was in the paint, which is what they want him to be. And he's guarding Christie. They reverse the ball to Christie. Hogard reacts just a little bit late, gets out on him, fouls him, makes a 3-pointer. Asked Izzo about that a little bit after practice today, and he said, yeah, he was reacting a little bit slow, to be nice. You can imagine in the film room how important those plays are. And Izzo drives it home every year. These are the plays that you've got to eradicate. These are the plays, these my bads, these little casual fog outs. If you want to go one and done in the NCAA tournament, keep making those plays. Like when Michigan State lost to Nevada in the 2004 first round of the NCAA tournament. That was out in Spokane. And it might have been Seattle. That was in Seattle in 2004. And that year, it was juniors like Chris Hill, Alan Anderson making some of those mistakes. And had been railing on them for 3 years. The next year, Chris Hill came off the bench. They made a change. Anderson finally came around. Torbert was always a real good guy. Came around with a little bit more focus down the stretch in 2005, and boom, they went to the Final Four. Surprised everybody. And if Alan Anderson hadn't gotten hurt in the regional final against Kentucky, I think Michigan State was primed to surprise North Carolina. North Carolina and Illinois, everybody was looking at that to be the super dream matchup. Michigan State was leading North Carolina in the semifinals without Alan Anderson. But the year before in 2004, you had my bads. Chris Hill was guarding a guy named Kirk Snyder. Nevada had like a 6'5" guy that was kind of a borderline NBA prospect as a senior, and Michigan State was up by 7, 8, 9, something like that. It's kind of like this Minnesota game, and let that guy get hot. A little bit my bads, a little bit late, a little bit late, a little bit late. Now you can't shut off his water. Momentum's changed. Now you're in trouble. They had a young Nick Fazekas at that time too. Ended up being a real good player. But these plays, like that one-armed pass on a play that you've put in as a new unscouted look that you go to late in the game, you've got scripted. These are the plays we want to go to with 8 minutes to go. And you run one of them, and one guy does a one-handed pass, and it screws up the whole thing. that'll get you beat by Nevada or anyone else in the first round. Might not get you into the tournament if you keep doing it. So Hogard gets in and helps, initially does part of the job, reacts to the double team, drops down, but needed to be aware of Christie, and right when that thing was contained, needed to get right back out on him. Is the pilot light flickering? Is there something going on that's just a little bit foggy? I don't know. But this team has the ability to be pretty good if they get rid of all those things. Do they have the ability to get rid of those things? Yes, they do. Will they choose to do that? That's the million-dollar question. If they do choose to do that and do all the little things, with Izzo running the thing, they can be pretty difficult. They can be good. But I have to wait and see. But they are one of the 34 teams, I think, that can go to the Final Four. I can't believe, am I saying that? I'm only saying that because going to the Final Four is, as we saw last year, you have to be able to play certain, a lot of styles. But, man, I look at FAU. They beat Memphis in a crap game. They beat Fairleigh Dickinson. Tennessee couldn't shoot straight in that game, I guess. And they beat Kansas State. They go to the Final Four. Sometimes you get that. Sometimes you get Duke in the second round. Can this Michigan State team beat last year's Memphis, last year's Fairleigh Dickinson, last year's Tennessee, last year's Kansas State? Well, they couldn't beat last year's Kansas State in the Sweet 16. So could they? But it was overtime. Could they do what Fairleigh Dickinson did last year? Can they do what FAU did last year? If FAU can do it, I'm not going to say this team can't. Now, Sweet 16 would be good at this point, but coming into the season, and I'm saying this now, I haven't even said Final Four since mid-December, and I'm not saying that they can do that. I'm just saying that the national landscape is as such, and it's random enough that if you get in that thing, you got a dice shooter's chance of making some noise. That's all I'm saying. Now, they got to get in it, and that's no guarantee. They're running out of chips. I keep using all these casino metaphors, but it is a gamble, a lot of it. All right, what do we have here? All right, question 3, Wixom Spartan from Wixom, Michigan says, if you could do one thing this next basketball offseason to best position this Michigan State basketball program to get Michigan State basketball back to a 1 to 3 seed line, a first seed, second seed, 3 seed, what would it be? Firstly, Jeremy fears the legs need to work. And he's working at it. I just don't know. I'm not a doctor. I've not seen the x-rays. I don't know. I talked to Izzo about it a little bit a couple weeks ago. Assuming that he gets his horsepower back, that's a big assumption. That's the first thing that has to happen. The legs have to have the spring back. I really don't know. I have no reason to believe that they won't be, but Fears has to be 100% back. And God bless him, hope it gets there. Trey Holloman needs to keep coming around. Holloman's had a good year. Most improved player on the team. Needs to continue to make a jump. 40% three-point shooter, I did not see that coming. He's had a real good rate, assist-to-turnover ratio. Can that continue to be the case if you're playing more minutes? We've seen a couple of wild pitches this year, just recently after he, for a while, led the nation in assist-to-turnover ratio. Talking about execution, I mentioned earlier about Akins with that one-armed casual pass. Izzo doesn't hate it. He hates it when you're missing free throws, but he knows you're trying to make it. He doesn't even hate it when you miss an open three-pointer. That's just basketball. He doesn't hate those things. What he does hate is when somebody makes a casual pass, when I've seen him rail against it, or when somebody just kind of loses focus and doesn't get out on Max Christie. Did I call him Max Christie? Cam Christie, who was a red letter scouting report guy. We're getting out on him, especially after he made a couple of them. And for Hogard, your team leader, your Mateen Cleaves, to have what I used to call like that little half-second vacation, little brain vacation. You can't go on brain vacation, okay? Execution. So the one-hand pass, that thing. And these are costing you points. There was another one, Holloman, who's been a good passer all year. There's like a ball reversal. I can't remember what the situation was. I think it might have been right after Sissoko had an offensive rebound. I think during that stretch when Walker was out with the groin injury. And let's see here. I can't remember when it was, but it was in the second half during that stagnant time on offense. I think it was offensive rebound, Sissoko. Sissoko kicks it out to Holloman. Holloman had like an open three, decided to turn it down because Akins had a better shot, passes it to Akins, and instead of putting it in the pocket right here, like the dude from Kansas State would have done, Holloman, who's been a good passer, lately, or all season, but lately it's gotten a little bit squirrely. Instead of right here, he throws it way up here, and Akins has to jump to catch it so it doesn't go out of bounds. Now that open three is it's closed. Defense is out on you. And Sissoko gets an offensive rebound and kicks it back out because the best time to get an open three-pointer is after an offensive rebound. They're well-schooled on that. Sissoko was really charging to the offensive glass at that point in the game. Good on him. 2 offensive rebounds there during that time when Walker was out. Also almost had a third, but ended up being a tied jump ball. Possession went to Minnesota. But 3 times while Walker was out, Sissoko hit the offensive glass hard. Credit to him. Helmet stickers. Got that one. Kicked it out to Holloman. Holloman could have shot that. Bless his heart. Unselfish. Passes it to Akins, but the pass was wild. If that's in the shooting pocket, the way Akins is shooting, I'd say it's a 50% chance it makes that 3. And Minnesota's comeback all of a sudden goes back to an 8-point lead, and the whole night might have been different. Execution, you might not. I never really looked at where passes are, but after going to practice for 30 years, Izzo's big on it's got to be in the shooter's pocket, and the difference between. If you catch it here and shoot a 3, you might be a 25% three-point shooter. You catch it right here, you might be 38%. Big difference. You catch it here, you don't even get the shot off. It's got to be in that shooter's pocket. And execution. Put that one in the shooter's pocket, 3 might go down. Akins doesn't do a one-hand pass, that might be a dunk. Hoggard gets out, recognizes it quicker, and you win the game. Those 3 things. And, I'm sure Minnesota can look at things also where they did wrong and had some leakage and spillage and could have changed the game. But these are the things, tightening the screws. As I like to say, 30 games, get your crap together. Well, it's game 20 or whatever it is right now, 22. A lot of loose screws, but there are some elements. So you're asking, next off season, what needs to happen for this team to become more, once again, a first seed, second seed, third seed. Michigan State has been a first seed, second seed, third seed type of team, occasionally over the years, but not like Kansas and Duke and like North Carolina in the old days. When they've gotten to the Final Four, they've done it as a 5 seed, they've done it as a 7 seed. You would like to do it as a 1 or a 2, but that's really not been their mode of operation over the years. They don't choose to do it the hard way, it just kind of ends up that way. So the first thing is Fears has to have all the elements, has to have all the like North Carolina in the old days. Secondly, they need Holloman to keep coming around. Need Holloman to keep improving. Now, is Akins going to be part of it next year? I don't know. He might be looking to go to the pros. He thought about the pros last year, came back. I'm not sure where. I'm sure if things go well, they'd like to have him back, but I don't know. It might be Holloman. I'm not sure what's going on there. Let me post something here to let people know that SpartanMag Live is going on Twitter. We are live via SpartanMag Live. Join us here. All right. There's that. I forgot to do that. Anyone who is new to this, give us a like here at the channel. Subscribe to the channel. We'd love that. Always helps. Share this video. That always helps. Helps us get seen more, and it helps all the algorithms and everything. We appreciate all of that. Also, go to SpartanMag.com, become a SpartanMag subscriber. SpartanMag, $1 for a month. Try it. You'll like it as we head towards spring practice and coverage of Michigan State basketball heading into March Madness. Wixom Spartan is asking if he could change anything this offseason to get Michigan State back to being a number 1 or 2 or 3 seed type team. What needs to happen? And I've listed a couple of them. Fears needs to be healthy. Holloman needs to keep coming around. And then you need to get productivity and continued improvement out of Jackson Kohler and Matty Sissoko. I mean, what happened to him the other night with those travels in the low post, I don't know. I mean, he's had trouble with touch. We've seen that. But the footwork thing, that's regression. And you got to be concerned about that. But you don't give up on him. And Cooper's got to keep coming around. And then Xavier Booker needs to become a player next year. Hey, I'm not hiding from the fact that it's crazy times. It's portal times, assuming he comes back. But like Izzo said a few weeks ago, he said, hey, if Book stays with me, I told Book, stay with me, I'll get you there. And I kind of believe that. Does Booker believe that? Does people believe that? I think so. He doesn't mind getting yelled at. He can handle that. But Booker needs to come around here late in the season, and that's possible. So for next year, I can see Booker being a plus player. 12 months ago, 18 months ago, I wasn't sure that could happen. But now I think it could. Akins, we'll have to wait and see. You know, the freshman coming in, Kurtang, I like Jace Richardson a lot, but true freshmen these days in the portal era, there's not a lot of teams getting a lot out of true freshmen. Kentucky's trying it. You know, Duke has had a little bit this year and last year. But you're not seeing a lot of teams getting a lot out of true freshmen. I like Richardson. So Michigan State's still going after Bryson Tucker. You know, top 15 kid, 6'6" type of guy, 6'7". It's between Michigan State, Kansas, and the G League. So Michigan State's recruiting against the G League. Tucker wants to be a one-and-done guy. So it's a question of, you know, which of those avenues is best suited for him to become a one-and-done. Is it Kansas? Is it Michigan State? Kansas has had some one-and-dones. Michigan State's had some. You go to the G League, that sounds good, but if you go to the G League, what if you're the 7th or 8th man? I don't know. So Michigan State's still looking into that one for next year. Like I said, I mean, Akins theoretically could still be part of it, but I think he wants to, I don't think he wanted to be a 4-year guy. And he sees Christie stick, he sees Buffkin stick, so that's kind of what you're going with. But Fears needs to be healthy. Holloman needs to keep coming around. Cohen Carr needs to take a step. Booker needs to take a step. Your big guys like Kohler. Kohler's a guy that could be real impact offensive player. The defense he's having trouble getting on the court. The injury did not help his wheels. And for him, it was all about the defensive wheels to get on the court. And he's a good kid, seems to love it. Everybody loves him, but it is the portal era. And you got to be, if he finishes the year playing 5 minutes a game, playing portal defense on him could be difficult. I've not heard anything about that, but that's just kind of the way it is. So you're asking me what else has to happen? Fears needs to be healthy. Holloman needs to keep coming around. Need development out of Kohler and Sissoko and Cooper and Booker if you keep them. And the thing that they're lacking is that, and I said it earlier, that 6'7" athletic wing forward guard, 6'6", 6'7", a guy that could play defense on a Domask, defense on an AJ Storr. You know, they don't have that 6'6" defender. A guy who can, on offense can also do the Swiss Army knife thing. Give you a shot from range, give you one shot, dribble medium range, run the wing, finish. You know, Morris Peterson. I know it seems like there'd be a lot of guys like that. So where do you get a guy like that? I don't know. I can't give you the list, but I would be scouring the portal for those 6. You know, like, I mean, I'm not saying you go out and get the guy like Connect for Tennessee, but yeah, that's what I'm talking about. Guys like that. And it may not need to be a star like that. Like Michigan State a couple of years ago went after the Bridges kid at West Virginia. Ended up at Baylor, and he's pretty good. Plays a 3-4 type of guy. That's the type of guy that would look real good on Michigan State's roster right now. 6'7", that can be a stretch 4, maybe play some 3. So Michigan State's not a complete team right now. I didn't think they were a complete team coming into the year. Now they had a smallish backcourt. It was supposed to be a dynamic backcourt. It's been a pretty good backcourt. It's been inconsistent, but it's not been dynamic. The defense has not been as good in the backcourt as it would like. Plus, they have matchup problems on guys that are 6'7", like AJ Storr, like Domask. Could have a problem with Terrence Shannon, too. Everybody has trouble with Terrence Shannon, right? But not only does Michigan State lack that 6'6" Swiss Army knife, triple threat guy that can also be a defender, which would be nice to have, but also the stretch 4 like we've talked about all season. So not a complete team. And as everybody can see, they don't have low post scoring at the center position either. So preseason top 5 rankings, Michigan State was in the Sweet 16 last year, had a lot of players coming back, but they were not a complete team, as you can see. They're trying to make the best out of the situation, and if they do play their A game and play well, you can still do damage in March, even if you don't have a complete team. We'll see if that's different this year. Maybe I'll change my tune on that. Maybe this year in the NCAA tournament, all the Final Four participants are going to be like chalk 1 seeds and 2 seeds. Maybe it'll be Purdue, North Carolina, Connecticut, and Houston. And I'll have to change my tune for the following year. Question 4, Gator from Fort Myers, Florida says, could you go through the linebackers and defensive back safeties and suggest who's going to start? For linebackers, Gator says he believes it's going to be Halliday and Jordan Hall. And for defensive backs, he thinks Dylan Tatum and Chance Rucker at corner. And he thinks at safeties, he's got Mangum and Malik Spencer. And for nickelback, he's saying Angelo Gross. What do you think? And he says next week he'll ask about the 2-deep. At nickelback, I've not heard this. I've not confirmed this, but I had heard that initially that the new coaches felt that Dylan Tatum was better suited for nickelback. And I don't disagree. He's got some thickness and he's got some quickness. And a couple of years at the corner position, I think, will serve him well playing more inside. So what does that do with Gross? Maybe you play both of them at nickel. I don't know. Maybe they compete for it and they both play. I'm not sure. But Tatum, I thought, was pretty good at corner at times. Had some other times that maybe didn't look like a natural corner. But maybe Michigan State will have the luxury of moving him off of that position. I'm not sure. And we talked about this last week at the corner position. If you've got Chance Rucker, Charles Brantley's back, and Demetrius Martin being the new corner coach, it's a clean slate with a lot of these guys. I don't close the door on the possibility that he might be able to get more out of Charles Brantley than the previous coaches did. And I like Salgado a lot, but he only had a few months with him. I mean, this guy will have Martin will have the same amount of time, but I don't know. I don't close the door on that. I know that Brantley's a little guy and gets himself hurt a lot, plays hard, but Rucker and Brantley, don't close the door on those two guys being good corners. Tatum's still there also. The redshirted corners, I don't know much about. Sean Brown, Eddie Pleasant, Phillip Davis, I don't know much about them. Phillip Davis got on the field a little bit late in the year. I didn't really get a chance, like I've talked about last week on this podcast and in previous weeks, I didn't really get a chance to talk to assistant coaches to find out what's going on, second string, third string scout team, who's looking good. Never got a chance to do that. Really, since COVID, it's been harder to get those type of interviews. I'm hoping to have a little bit more of an ability to ask those questions off podium, because everything's on a podium now. I'm hoping to have a little bit more of that information just so I can have a better working knowledge so that I can pass a little bit of that on to you. Because in a situation like this, I don't know much about Sean Brown, Eddie Pleasant, and Phillip Davis. I don't know which of those three are knocking on the door to really being that type of guy. The other thing that hurts that is when you're changing position coaches year after year after year, it's harder for them to it's easier. It used to be easier in the old days when Mike Tressel was coaching linebackers, and he would say, yeah, these three, out of these 4 guys, 3 of them are going to be starters. These are probably the second string, and keep an eye on these guys coming up on third string. They're looking pretty good, and we got one walk-on named so-and-so who could be, he year after year after year, I could go to Mike Tressel and find out, what that whole department was looking like. Now, that was before the portal. Nowadays, people are coming and going, and it's different, but I'm hoping to be able to have that kind of insight going forward. Back in the old Spartan magazine days, that was one of the backbones of our entire news organization, was 1 to 85 really having an ear to the ground and what was going on, to the point where, we could give you some forecasts on what to expect, not only individually, but it also helped us get a better idea on the team. I just got something here. Let's see. All right. Nothing that pertains to any of this. Sorry about that. As far as corners go, I was talking about guys that signed, true freshmen coming in, and I'm intrigued by Andrew Brinson. Andrew Brinson originally committed to Oregon State, corner, number 137 in Florida. I look at that film and I think he's underrated. I think that guy at 6'1" is a corner out of Tampa, Florida. I think if he's in the state of Michigan, I think he's a top 20 player. Corner is a position where true freshmen have a little more likelihood to play early. But hey, you got Rucker out there as a true freshman last year, played 500 snaps, did all right. I don't remember many times, maybe any times all year when Chance Rucker looked like a true freshman. Like I'm sure he had some that I didn't notice, but in terms of freshman moments for that true freshman, Chance Rucker, I thought he was solid for 500 snaps. So could Brinson do it too? I don't close the door on that. Brinson, talked about him last week. In high school, good press man-to-man. Has some physicality in press coverage. Has some toughness to him. Has corner feet to go with it. And there's one highlight of him going against a good wide receiver, running a quick go route, and he's in press. He turns his hips and covers him. Looked good. And there was another play I talked about last week where he's in press coverage and it's slant. He matches it, changes directions, breaks on the ball. Played some safety in high school also. As a punt returner, did some good things. Like I said, I think he's a top 20, maybe even a top 15 player in the state of Michigan. Andrew Brinson. So I don't shut the door on someone like that coming in and having a Chance Rucker type of year. Keyshawn Williams, the previous staff got a commitment from him. This staff retained him. 6 feet, 180. Number 47 player in Tennessee from Murfreesboro. As a wide receiver, his takeoff is very good in terms of his quickness. Can really high point it as a wide receiver. Physical tackler on defense. Good core strength. He really ragdolls wide receivers when he gets a hold of them. Does a good job defeating blocks and playing the run to his side and setting the edge, which is something that young corners struggle with when they make that transition to college football. They've never really had to, defeat a block and set an edge and take on a block and turn it back to the help in high school all that much. It's more than just being a cover corner. You got to play the leverage and all those things. I think Keyshawn Williams can do that. Did not really see him in his high school film in terms of press coverage and flipping his hips and all those athletic things that a corner needs to do. So that's a big part of it. But Deshaun Williams from Murfreesboro, true freshman, has a lot of the other components. And I think Brinson does too. One of those two guys I could see getting in that too deep at corner and knocking on the door. So that's what's going on at corner, in my opinion. At safeties, you mentioned Mangum and Malik Spencer. They're going to be juniors. I think they'll be veterans, and I think that they will do well with Blue Adams there at the safety position. And I think they're going to be more and more physically mature, and I think they're going to be good team leaders. They're going to be solid. You've got Armorion Smith coming back. Was injured early last year, transfer from Cincinnati. I thought that he was a capable player. I'm not sure about Sean Brown. You got Malcolm Jones coming back. Malcolm Jones Sr. listens to the show a lot. Shout out to him. We'll have to wait and see what the new coaches think of him. He got on the field a couple times here and there last year. It looked like he belonged. Khalil Majid, former walk-on, has had a lot of playing time last couple of years. He's still around. Does he have more ceiling to aspire to chase? We'll have to wait and see. But there's some ability there with Mangum and Spencer being the main guys and Amarion Smith being capable as well. Let's go over here to the comments area. And we're gonna go in 2-minute offense a little bit more and get back to these questions quickly because I kind of went long on some of those questions. We've got Dr. Terrence Gibson saying happy Thursday. We mentioned him earlier. Trenton Sabo saying checking in from Charlotte, North Carolina. He says, I like us against Illinois this weekend. I think Michigan State's going to play well. I think Illinois is pretty good at 17-5. Shannon is 100 miles an hour. And Izzo's really respectful of Illinois' transition game. You don't hear Izzo give high compliments about an opposing transition game very often. There's some teams that are pretty good at it, but he says Illinois, to quote him today, he said it's right up there with Michigan State's 2000 transition attack. I thought Michigan State's transition attack in 2005 was really, really good. 2000 was good also. And when they had Kalen Lucas in 2009, it was really good. Yeah, 2009. I didn't see the Illinois-Nebraska game, the overtime game. Nebraska's good at times too, but it went into overtime. I saw part of it because I do remember seeing that Rogers was just a beast on the glass. So Michigan State defensive rebounding is so important, and Illinois has a lot of size. So matching up with all that size across the board is a problem. I think Michigan State's going to play well. I think Izzo's going to come out of this game wishing that he would have had 3 days to prepare rather than a day and a half. Could it have made a difference? Maybe, we'll see, but he's already griping about that. It's hard to win on the road in the Big Ten. Illinois is a top 10 team. Illinois lost at Northwestern. Now Michigan State needs to go out and make all that stand up and say that, yeah, we're hard to beat on the road too. And get a win against a top 10 team going to be very difficult to do. If Coleman Hawkins is making 4 out of 7 from 3, probably not going to happen. What you need to have happen, like against Nebraska, is you need Goody to go 0 for 6 from 3, and you need Harmon to go 0 for 4 from 3. Get 0 for 10 out of those guys. That would help. Illinois ends up 9 out of 34 from 3. It's less than 33%. That's why it went to overtime. But Rogers, all that damage on the boards. Hawkins, 4 out of 7 from 3. Terrence Shannon, 16 shots, 3 out of 10 from 3. They'll run, and it goes up, and they go to the glass. Michigan State's going to be wired in on what to do, and we'll have to wait and see physicality, whether they can hang. Walker today sat out most of the practice, trying to rest the groin. Izzo said Walker wanted to practice, but Izzo said, no, you sit down. Did a couple of walkthrough things. He was dressed, did some shooting, but sat him down. So can Michigan State's bodies hold up? Can they get more from someone like Cohen Carr? I think Cohen Carr is an important matchup type of guy against Illinois, just because he's got that kind of frame and horsepower. And you're getting into mid-February, as Al McGuire used to say, you're not a freshman anymore. That needs to be the case with Cohen Carr. Could that have been the case with Fears? I mean, Fears was such a good quarterback and communicator and leader. I remember early in the year, there were some media people saying, man, I tell you what, Fears, I could see him taking the job from Hoggard. And I was like, man, I thought to myself, not going to happen. Hoggard's going to be just fine. But after that Minnesota game and some others, they started, was it Holloman in place of Hoggard back in December on one occasion? Might they have done that again just to snap him back to attention, or for better, for worse? Well, you can't do it now because you don't have Fears. You still have Holloman, but Holloman can do a lot of good things, and he's a plus off the bench. But I don't think you make him your starting quarterback. But if Fears had been around and continued to come around, that could have been a viable option. Long term, maybe not. But here and there, maybe so. So, tough game against Illinois, but I respect your opinion. Trenton Sabo from Charlotte, I don't disagree. What I'm expecting is the same thing I expected prior to Michigan State playing Baylor. I thought Michigan State was going to play well against Baylor, but not quite get a W. This time, against Illinois, I'm kind of expecting Michigan State to play well. Like well enough to win a first-round NCAA tournament game. Maybe well enough to win a second-round NCAA tournament game and get to a Sweet 16. But maybe not well enough to beat Illinois on Saturday. Illinois still has to show that they're consistent also, because they get a little bit wonky also. Huge game coming up. It was a huge game when they played Maryland. Michigan State answered the bell, did pretty well. It was a great opportunity at Minnesota. Michigan State played well in spurts. This game against Illinois is the biggest game of the year because it is the next game. If they get a win, it'd be massive, and it would also show that they're capable of putting together a game like that, which should carry over to other games. But all of a sudden, playing at Michigan in a couple, next week, that's looking difficult too. Now, they just beat Wisconsin. Not only do they have Doug McDaniel at home, they've got some, Michigan's got some front runner type of talent. They've got guys that have talent, and as long as the game is close or they're leading, they can play really well. The minute the wheels start to come off, they all kind of quit and fizzle out. But when they've got Doug McDaniel, maybe they've got a little more staying power. And also with McDaniel, right now, the negative is they're racking up losses and having a miserable season. But the positive is, everybody's beaten up right now. Ask Tyson Walker. A lot of people are beaten up and strained. Not Walker. I mean, not Doug McDaniel. Doug McDaniel's going to be fresh. He's only playing one game a week. So you get them, you're playing on the road. It's going to be a rivalry game. There'll be a lot of Michigan State fans there, but Michigan's going to be trying real hard to get a split. And they'll have Doug McDaniel, which makes them better. And he's fresher than the average Bear, so it's a strange combination. All right. We've got MSU Hunter, okay. Oh, he's saying the sound is good. Jason G's here. MSU Detroit fan, appreciate your compliments, Jason G. Thank you. MSU Detroit fan says, all right, so I got a question. Since Aiden Childs is most likely to be the starting quarterback, who will most likely be the backup between Alessio Milivojevic, Rylan Jesse, and Tommy Schuster? Great question. And that competition will begin this spring. All four are on campus, aren't they? I know Schuster is. I think Milivojevic, I think, is. And I think Jesse is also. So that competition begins this spring. Let me check that. Now, I think it's going to be Schuster. I just think all of that experience means a lot. And he's a guy that, Schuster, all-time leading scorer or all-time leading passer, I think, at North Dakota. Oh, for crying out loud. Here we go. I don't know if I've got it here or not. Let's see. I'll have it somewhere. Give me a second. I'm looking it up. Some of you are already barking at me and letting me know whether they're on campus or not. All right. Yes, both quarterbacks are enrolled and will be there this spring. And so will Schuster. So all four are going to be competing. So they went from 0 scholarship quarterbacks in December to 4 new ones. And yes, Childs is going to be the guy. I think it's going to be Schuster just because he has that experience. Milivojevic has some solid ability. Rylan Jesse, I think, has further to go. Although there was some film that surfaced last week that was kind of impressive with him. Long story short, I think it's Schuster. Not very tall, maybe 6'1". And at 6'1", you better be really athletic. He's not all that athletic. He's short, but he's slow. All right? But he can put it on a dime and he can read, and that's worth something right now. Arm strength, he's kind of like Hauser a little bit, but he's more accurate than Hauser. As an athlete, he's kind of like Hauser, but he's a little smaller. Stubby, but he's a winner, and he's mature, and he left a great situation in North Dakota where he set some records to give himself a shot to try to prove it at the Big Ten level. And who was the walk-on that came out of nowhere for Illinois last year? That like all of a sudden came in because of injury and just lit it up against somebody. I don't know if Schuster has quite the arm to get that done, but it wouldn't shock me if he's capable of doing something like that. I can't think. You guys can help me out. The guy for Illinois last year was a walk-on. His dad, he was a legacy. His dad played at Illinois. Came in, and I don't know if he was a transfer or not. Michigan State didn't play Illinois, so I don't have the whole background on them. But I think it's going to be Schuster, long story short, for a year. Spartan MD says, I don't feel tardy. Second week in a row. Was he the guy that said that last week? I brought my pencil. Give me something to write on, man. MSU Detroit fan says, I think Schuster will be quarterback too, since he's a senior and his experience might give him the edge over Milivojevic and Jesse, although I would like Milivojevic to be the backup. Fair enough, and I agree with you. Ben Chi says, I'm not excited about basketball or football at the moment. Well, come on, Ben Chi. What are you going to be got to be excited about something? No, I understand what you're saying. But just put it on simmer and wait. In the meantime, have some dip. Marlon Milano says, what up, comp? Go green, go white. MSU Detroit fan says, if we can get the win over Illinois, that will be huge for both standings and March Madness seeding. I agree. And also it would be huge because Michigan State will have had to have played extremely well to beat a team like that. And that would bode well toward trying to get their crap together after 31 games. MSU Hunter Spartan says, all right, MSU Detroit fan says, MSU remaining schedule, Illinois, at Penn State, at Michigan, Iowa, Ohio State, at Purdue, Northwestern, and at Indiana. He didn't make a point with that. He just listed the schedule. Thank you for that. MSU Hunter Spartan says, pundits have been hammering Izzo for lack of success the last 4 years, both in recruiting and coaching. Which pundits are you talking about? I guess I'm a pundit. And the last 4 years, I'll say, okay, who's been good? Who would you rather be? Illinois, they're getting bounced every year. Purdue lost last year in the first round. Ohio State's in shambles. Michigan's in shambles. Wisconsin, they look good this year for a few months. They were in the NIT last year. Who's good? Recruiting. Well, here's the deal. Izzo's been to the NCAA tournament 26 straight years. This might be news to people, but that's hard to do. You know how hard it is? No one's ever done it before. at one school the way he has, ever, 26 straight years. It's hard to get in the tournament every single year, hard to do. And when he gets in there, makes some noise here and there. 4 straight years. You're counting the COVID year. The COVID year when they lost to UCLA. I mean, the COVID year does not count. The COVID year, they had to spend 4 weeks without Izzo that year. 4 weeks in the middle of the season. 2 weeks when he had COVID. 2 weeks when the season was when Michigan State was shut down because of COVID. 4 weeks without one of the great coaches in the history of the game. And everything was just upside down that year. Everything. So throw that out. They did a great job late in that season to beat, Indiana, Ohio State, Michigan, like 3 of the last 4 games to keep the streak alive. That was awesome. Got in the tournament. They were up by 13 against UCLA, ended up losing the game. UCLA goes to the Final Four. If that's a bad season with everything they went through, then, go be a Kansas City Chiefs fan with Taylor Swift and just stop being a Michigan State observer. Fair enough if you want to say that they've struggled, but to say that they've been terrible in those 4 years, like I said, Sweet 16 last year. Get a grip on on reality. Sweet 16. You want to be, like I said, you want to be Purdue. Purdue's gone to 1 Final Four in the last 50 years. Purdue University, basketball university, great fans, starving fans, 1 Final Four since 1971. And you want to bitch about Michigan State. So, whatever. I don't know. Everyone can have their opinions and whatever. Derek Hurst says, Hogard fan, but when Walker left, we do too much. Derek Hurst says, I think that shifted the momentum of the game. He's still a good one, though. Glad he's a Spartan. Good post. I agree with all of that. I think that Hogard did try to take over. And I got into that in the article that I wrote, the .comp article I wrote the morning after the game. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There were five possessions while Walker was out. And I agree. And I wrote about those things and went back and watched it again. Michigan State was like 0 for 7 from the field during that time. And, there was one time when Trey Holloman had an open three-pointer. I thought it was interesting. The first possession when Walker was out. And part of the problem was, in my opinion, that everyone knew Walker had the groin injury and the way he was hobbled off and helped off. There was a psychological thing, too. He was only off the court for 4 minutes. But from a psychological standpoint, the entire team and bench might have thought, okay, we have to win the rest of this game without him. And you're right. I think Hogard did try to go into overdrive and be the man, which I have got a lot of respect for. I would want my point guard to think that he can do that and have the confidence to take it over. Does he have too much confidence to a fault? Sometimes, maybe so. And Izzo's on him about decision making, and there's a lot of gray area there where you're not supposed to take a 17-footer, but I'm a basketball player and I'm going to make this shot. Cleves used to make those shots. Not a good shooter, but in clutch situations, he would get shots and make them, even though he wasn't a good percentage shooter. Hogard kind of similar, has not had those clutch moments yet. He's been pretty good in recent years driving and finishing through contact, but it's a little more crowded at the rim now because that's the MO on him, and also he doesn't have guys spacing out the floor like he did last year, teammate-wise. This one, Walker's out. They run a stagger screen to Trey Holloman. Went to Trey Holloman. I don't remember any other times when Michigan State ran a play for Trey. They did stagger along the baseline. Open, missed a three-pointer. Sissoko got the offensive rebound, gave it back to Hogard. Hogard drives and misses. At that point, Hogard trying to take over too much, to your point, gets the offensive rebound back to Hogard and maybe reset the offense and run something rather than going right back up with it. Hindsight being 2020, to your point. I don't hate him for making that decision, but these are the type of things in film study that they've been grilling over the last 24 hours. Next possession, Hogard missed a 17-footer. That was when the shot clock was down. It was a high screen. They ran a screen roll replace to Akins, and it was covered. Handed it back off to Hogard. Hogard misses a 17-footer with 9 seconds left on the shot clock. 9 seconds, that's probably another thing. I didn't ask Izzo about that today because he had to get going on the recruiting trail. Ball comes, they run a play, gets covered, it's back to Hogard. There's 9 seconds left. Usually 9 seconds left in the Michigan State system. That's time to, get everything set, bring out, we're going to reset, ball screen, maybe pick and pop to Kenny Goins for a 3, pick and pop to Hauser for a 3, screen roll, screen short roll, which we don't see much because screen roll, maybe Hall could do something with that. Sissoko and Cooper would not be able to do much with the short roll. Kohler could, but he's not on the court because you need him on defense, or because it's a problem on defense. But 9 seconds back in the hands of the point guard. Hogard was of the mindset, 9 seconds on the shot clock, I got to do something with it for my own shot. Izzo's of the mindset, 9 seconds is enough time to run a quick hitter of some sort. That's where Michigan State needs to improve. Play gets covered, your late shot clock play. Instead of Hogard against the world. Now, he'd be a lot better if he had Joey Hauser out there with him. Sometimes it goes to Walker and he creates something, and that's getting a little tougher too. What game was it when they double teamed it and sent it over to Hall? I can't remember. Anyway, that was the second possession. Third possession, Akins missed a three-pointer off the dribble, the shot clock down to 1. This was after timeout. They ran floppy action. Floppy action didn't get anything going. Then they went to Trey Holloman with a high ball screen. Nothing happened. Goes back to Akins, and he had to force a tough three-pointer because none of those things worked. Now, could the screening have been better in those situations? Maybe so. But you're on the court. You don't have Tyson Walker. And, Malik Hall, they were double-teaming. So if Walker's not out there and you're double-teaming Malik Hall and making someone else beat you, Michigan State runs out of options kind of quickly. Next possession, the fourth one with Walker out. A.J. Hogard drives, misses a layup. On this one, it was a side ball screen. He kind of hangs up there. And, it was to the open side. Michigan State had success in the first half. Side ball screen to the open side. The open side with only two people, two-man gain. Side ball screen. I mentioned earlier, side ball screen. Carson Cooper dunk in the first half. Side ball screen. Xavier Booker fouled, makes 2 free throws. Side ball screen. Cooper's open. They don't get the ball to him. 3 times it was open. First half, I think Minnesota made some adjustments, but I don't know exactly what they were. But they went back to a side ball screen look here with Hogard. Izzo didn't like the fact that they were late getting into their offense sometimes. This one was not ideal because and I don't know what Michigan State ran previously, but it's side ball screen from the right wing, which means that Hogard would be working it to his left hand, which is not a strong hand. A lot of Michigan State's offense, if it's a side ball screen, you might notice goes from the left wing to the right for a right-handed dribbler. So Hogard got the screen there, but he refused the screen. He didn't use it, which a lot of people in basketball will refuse the screen if they think the defense is overplaying it. Did the left-hand, right-hand thing come and do it? I'm not sure. He refuses it, goes in, and he's been really good at finishing through traffic, through bumps and so forth through the years. Gets there, and Minnesota did a good job rotating and defending the rim. So he goes up and misses the shot. So are they mad that he refused the screen? I didn't really ask. He misses, but Sissoko got the offensive rebound. And the problem on this one was, this was the one I mentioned earlier. Sissoko gets the offensive rebound. The problem is Hogard went in there, rim protection, shoots, did not hit the rim. Shot clock didn't reset. Sissoko gets the rebound, sends it back out to Holloman. And Holloman is open, and he doesn't take the 3. And he's not aware that the shot clock's down to 4. He passes it over to Akins, and Akins is open, but he gives him the wild pass. That was, at that point, Michigan State's up 45-43 with, 10 minutes to go or so. If it's in the pocket and he makes a 3, it's 48-43, and the whole tenor, that kind of staves off the comeback. Everything could have changed right then. The pass is not in the pocket. And he can't shoot, and he gives it back to Holloman. Holloman realizes there's 1 second left, and he has to shoot it from the hash mark, doesn't score. Next possession. I can't remember what Michigan State ran, but A.J. Hogard ends up open along the baseline, 18 feet, and they're daring him to shoot it. Shoots it and misses it. Not a shot that Izzo wanted. So, Derek, you're talking about that during that stretch, you thought Hogard tried to do too much. And I agree with you, but it was a noble undertaking. He was trying to lead the team when at that point he thought that somebody needed to, and Walker might be out for the game. So I understand why he did it. As it turns out, that was a pivotal moment in the game for sure. Hogard was asked after practice today, basically in those words, do you think you tried to do too much? And he said no. All right, Matthew Latham says, he's talking about coming off the bench. Kazoo Green says, checking in from Portage, Michigan, got out of the zoo long ago. Don't blame me for Portage Northern's Jaden Walker heading west. We're a Portage Central family. Duly noted, thank you. Trevor Thompson says, I like fans being upset. It means the standards have increased since Skiles. Izzo is also a better recruiter than Judd Heathcote, though Judd was a better game day coach. I don't know if Judd was a better game day coach. Judd was good. Izzo was good. There's sometimes when coaches are, there were times when Izzo outcoached Krzyzewski. There were times when Izzo outcoached Roy Williams and vice versa. So whoever's a better coach on one day is not always the better coach over and over. Steve Meyer says, get after these guys, Jim. Kazoo Green says, Izzo would have gotten that second national title ring in 2020. Nobody ever would convince me otherwise. So unfortunate. I think that they would have had a good shot in 2020. I thought they had a really good shot in 2010 if Kalen Lucas hadn't gotten hurt. And I think in 2005 they could have had a shot if Anderson hadn't gotten hurt. And I think Adrian Payne's senior year when they lost to Connecticut in the Elite Eight at Madison Square Garden, if Appling hadn't been injured for the last half of the season, I think they could have won one that year. I think they've had a lot of bad luck injury-wise, and I think they've been close. And I think he's going to get a second one. Dean Smith didn't get his first one until his 20th year or so, and he got two, late in his career. But they've had some bad luck, and if the second one doesn't come along, and then COVID took Cassius Winston out of his senior year. So you didn't have a tournament, a senior year for Cassius, a senior year for Lucas. Actually, it was Lucas's junior year. Senior year for Appling, basically. That UConn game also, I happened to be talking with Mike Garland a week or so ago, and he was talking to somebody else about it. That UConn game still bugs the hell out of him and some of those other guys because some of Michigan State's secret sauce is the one-day prep. You get to a site, you win the first game in the Sweet 16, you've got one day to get ready for the next game, and that's where Izzo really thinks he's at his best, and everybody believes in him and believes in the staff, and they just get it done, and they make great use of every single moment. They've got it down to a science. They felt in New York that weekend that they got screwed by just the logistics. There were like one or two or three occasions when they were on a goddamn bus in the middle of Manhattan taking a 1-mile bus ride that took an hour, and it killed Izzo. Izzo also they would make use of hotel rooms in a ballroom, putting tape down and just going through a 10-minute walkthrough before lunch. And then after lunch, another 5-minute walkthrough. And then before breakfast, a little 5-minute walk. And they didn't have a hotel ballroom to do that because hotels in New York City are so small. And New York City, at that point, had never really hosted NCAA tournament games because New York City had always been a national invitation city, NIT. That was all what New York City was about. And for years, there were no NCAA tournament games in the Big Apple. This was one of the first times. It was the first time that Izzo had ever played in New York for an NCAA tournament. And they felt from a logistic standpoint, they did not have everything down like they normally would to beat that UConn team. And UConn won the national title that year. They hate to complain about that because they don't want to sound like complainers. And there's a lot of people out there that don't accept those things. But that's the reality of how and why Michigan State feels that they've won some games they maybe shouldn't have won in the past. Like when they beat Louisville in the Elite Eight in 2009. Yeah, Rick Pitino's a master, but in a one-day prep in the tournament, Michigan State was better prepared that day. And they just didn't feel like they had all of their intangibles at their disposal. And it still bothers the hell out of Garland. So they think they could have had one that year also. Trevor Thompson says, I wouldn't have a problem with Michigan State basketball if Izzo held himself more accountable and not blamed the players publicly constantly. Hogard was not the reason they lost. I could point out 15 things. Fair point. MSU Hunter Spartan says North Carolina lost at Georgia Tech and Clemson at home. Malcolm Jones Sr. is here. Good to hear from him. Trevor Thompson says, never compare yourself to other people or programs. Fans are complaining him to his own standards. Even Rico says the bar drops each year. I don't know what that's supposed to mean. Jim Morrison says, I'm beginning to wonder if Michigan State basketball fans deserve Izzo. There are a lot of schools that would love him running their program. Remember, the grass is greener. Right. It's greener on the other side, he says. MSU Hunter says, good points, Comp, but what I don't see is improved recruiting and not exploring the portal more. Good point about the portal. And Izzo said in the press conference last week that he will adjust. He's not against adjusting. I wouldn't be surprised if they get more serious about the portal this year. And I've not talked to them about it, but I think someone in that, a mature guy at a mid-major level who's a 6'6", 6'7", just add water, plug and play right now, I think could help. I don't know who that guy might be, but you would scour the country for that type of guy. And I don't think he's against it. I think he's been against it previously, but I think he's coached against it enough this year that I think he realizes he's got to make an adjustment to that. Mr. Bowman says, you mean Jason Strayhorn? No, I mean Jonathan Strayhorn. Jason Strayhorn was a center. Jonathan Strayhorn was a walk-on defensive tackle. No relation. Matthew Latham says, incoming recruiting class is the top 5-10 class for hockey. We were asked about the question about Michigan State hockey a minute ago. Now Matt's got the information. Says Michigan State has one of the best 2007 birth year commitments coming the year after Potter. I think up to 5 USA developmental team member commitments, combining both U18 and U17. 2007 birth year only have 3 commitments, but average 4-star. So if you have 5 guys committed from the USA developmental team, development program team, for years Michigan State had 0 players coming out of there, and now if you're starting to get 5, then you're up there with the elite roster building programs. Matthew Latham says staff is doing well. This season is only helping that. Matthew Latham says, talking about hockey recruiting, says hope they can keep Artie another year. That's Levshinov, the Belarusian defenseman. He says he'll be a top 5 pick in the NHL this spring. Augustine will be another interesting one. He should be back next year, but wondering beyond that. Yeah, Augustine is the youngest starting goaltender in college hockey. And the fact that he is, 6'2", not the biggest guy, does not, there's a lot of NHL goalies that have a lot of size. He does not have ideal size, so that might be even more reason that he might not be as attractive to pro scouts. Attractive enough that he was a second-round draft pick by the Red Wings, but I don't know. I'll have to ask around, but maybe there's a chance he stays more than 2 years. What was the other one? Let's see here. Latham points out that the Red Wings goaltending situation is not great, so that's another reason maybe Augustine leaves earlier. Mr. Bowman says, I remember when Tom used to script his first 5 plays. Maybe we need to go back to that. They still do that. And they still play. They script the first 5 plays of the first half, and you'll notice that a lot of that usually entails a low post touch. He wants to get a low post touch in there early, just to see what they do, and also maybe to get a big guy going and draw a foul or something. Jeff Goodman, can't throw a football 20 yards, says I think Minnesota was the final straw. Get rid of Izzo. Spunky181 says, hey, just getting here. Jeff Evans says, get rid of Izzo. Anyone who has this mentality is an idiot. I think that Jeff Goodman can't throw a football 20 yards, is just trying to get a rise out of people. Jeff Evans says, Jim, only one team in the Big Ten has a winning record on the road. Only one team. Jeff Evans says, and that's Purdue. Isn't that kind of weird? Yes, that is weird. Nobody's winning on the road consistently. Jeff Goodman can't throw a football 20 yards says, why keep Izzo? He's older than Biden and hasn't been able to figure out Painter yet. I think that Jeff Goodman can't throw a football 20 yards as a Purdue fan, or guard for that matter. The game may have passed him by. Now, the game has passed me by, but not Izzo yet. I mean, Izzo, I'm sure you're a Purdue fan. If you're a Purdue fan, Purdue was great last year, won the Big Ten tournament, but by March 20th, you would have traded your season for Michigan State's. Right around the time he lost to Fairleigh Dickinson. Right around the time Michigan State beat USC. Even before Michigan State beat Marquette. After Michigan State beat Marquette, you definitely would have traded your season for Michigan State. Purdue. You would have, and you know it. Nothing against Purdue. Great respect for them and their fans. Jeff Evans says, Jeff, you're obviously uneducated. I don't know. I appreciate your... I'll just move on from this. What do we have here? Jeff Goodman says, Jeff Goodman can't throw a ball 20 yards, says, guard came to Lansing and basically pooed on the floor. Thank you for using rated G language. Appreciate that. That's something I've failed to do this year on this podcast tonight. I apologize. I've used a couple of bad words. I don't usually do that, but I got riled up. Greg Gard did come in and poo on the floor, and they were good. Wisconsin was good earlier in the year, and they were good a couple weeks ago. I thought they were good for a few minutes against Purdue. They're a good team in a lot of ways, but that Wisconsin team, sometimes they're good early and they have trouble sustaining. Wisconsin, I know they had injuries last year, but last year they ended up in the NIT. So they had a good December and good half of January. And I got great respect for Wisconsin and what they do and all their things. They got good players, and Michigan State does not match up well with them. They don't match up well with Illinois. And as I say that, it's a good chance that they get in the NCAA tournament, and if they happen to win 1 or 2 or 3 games, at some point you're going to play a team that Michigan State does not match up well with. And Michigan State's best teams that have gone deep in the tournament, as Izzo has put it together, have been teams that can play against all styles and all matchups. This team doesn't have that. It's hard to get there. If Sissoko had come around more, if Kohler hadn't gotten hurt and come around more, and if Pierre Brooks, that you're building to have that type of team that can win 6 games in March. Hard to get there. This team doesn't quite have that. First, they have to get to March. C. Paulson says the Wisconsin losses really are looking worse and worse. I didn't think that would be the case. I think part of that's what I just talked about. For some reason, Wisconsin, they can get to midseason form quicker than a lot of teams. And then, so maybe the time to play Wisconsin is now and not December 2nd. I'm going to move past some of these things. Trevor Thompson says Minnesota blew by Walker 3 times and took him to the rim. Hall got taken to the rim several times. Akins made several mistakes on film. His assist-to-turnover ratio is 28-25, horrible. I agree with that about Akins. Good shooter, good athlete. He's good on defense when he's tuned in. The basketball IQ is not great. I give Akins credit. There were a couple times when he drove hard and got stopped and managed to get the ball back out to reset. Usually if he drives hard, he's going to dead end and it's not going to work. It's not going to end well. In that game, there were a couple times when he drove hard and got turned away, and the universe didn't collapse. But you're right. Not a good passer. Not great with decisions. There was a time 3 or 4 games ago on the break when he had it set as an athlete on transition. He's going to go in and dunk and make something happen, but it was 1-on-3. Didn't have numbers and didn't turn out well. Came to the bench and Izzo was like, that's 1-on-3, and he said it kind of strongly. So there was a type of, this team in a lot of ways, like I've said, it's like herding cats. It's like they're herding cats. It's like they can't get them to, it's hard to get them all herded. Walker was taken off the dribble a couple times. He's a good defender. He had a groin problem. I don't know if you noticed that or not. Let's see here. Jeff Evans sounds like he's sparring with somebody. I guess Jeff Goodman can't throw a ball 20 yards. It sounds like he is a Michigan State fan. I guess Purdue's playing tonight, right? Against Indiana. Is that tonight? Andrew Brinson. Is it Brinson? Am I saying it wrong? All right, so Octomom. He says, Mike Tressel made your career. Let's try to get some better sources, Jim. Yeah, I'm working on it. Andrew Brinson. Am I saying it wrong? I might be saying his name wrong. Andrew Brinson. I don't know what the point is. Great point. That is why Coach Prime is falling in the developmental category. Trevor Thompson says they ran 2 guys at Hogarth, so he could not penetrate versus Minnesota. No one mentioned that. Same with Hall, who was double-teamed. Yeah, they double-teamed Hall. I think that's the most I've seen Hall get double-teamed. And there was one time when they double-teamed him, and Cooper was supposed to flash to the low post to be the valve, because that's the first place you look when you're double-teamed, is right under the rim. And Cooper kind of forgot to do it, and everything stalled, went back out. That's an execution thing Izzo was talking about also. Just little execution things, leaks, and brain fogs and things like that. JEW of M says Super Chat gives Super Chat 50. Given the success of Jake Retzlaff at BYU. Do you think Michigan State should start to recruit more Jewish players? He says, I think this would help with, I don't know what all this means. I don't think of things that way, so I'm not really sure, but interesting question, and thank you for the tip jar. I don't really know what to make of that, but I'm for recruiting anyone that can block a tackle and hit and run, man. So I think that's good for any program, no matter who they are. And thank you very much for your contribution to the program. Thank you. We certainly appreciate that. Thank you for the generous donation in the tip jar here tonight. Interesting question. Trevor Thompson says, I don't think anyone is saying they were terrible. They are comparing Izzo with Izzo and his expectations. Now I'll stop you right there, because comparing Izzo to Izzo's had a lot of seasons like this one right now. You go back to 02, 03, the end of 04, a lot of 05, even though they were ranked most of that year. Definitely some of 06, especially at the end of the year. 07 and 08, and even 2015 in there. It's had a lot of years where they've had these kind of struggles in January. Now they're getting a little bit further into February, and they're still on the bubble, and that's a little longer than usual. And it's a little bit more precarious than usual than some years. But I'm not going to say more than usual. This is not an unusual season. And people say to the Izzo standard, it's substandard. That's where I'm calling BS, because Izzo's had a lot of seasons like this. If you think that this is like abnormal for Izzo, you've not been watching Izzo for 25 years. And they've had a lot of years when they've gone to the Sweet 16 or Elite 8 or maybe even all the way to the Final Four when they've had these kind of struggles in February and January. That's been my point on the message board the last few weeks. So people want to make the point, oh, this is bad by Izzo's standards. You're not familiar with Izzo's standards. You're not familiar with the way a lot of his seasons have gone unless you're 14 years old and you're new to this and acting like you've been watching the team for 25 years. Now, there will come a time when Michigan State fails to make the NCAA tournament. There might be a year when Izzo doesn't get in the tournament and things don't work out. Maybe that's this year. I don't close the door on that being the possibility, but I also wouldn't close the door on them getting their crap together and being pretty good by the end of the season, which I would expect Michigan State fans to let it play out if they're familiar with the history. You just tried to cite the history. I think that your construct on the history is skewed. I don't think you're giving enough attention to those seasons in which Michigan State struggled in January and December and sometimes into February, maybe even got a little bit haywire in terms of the bubble, but eventually got things straightened out and ended up being competitive in March. Maybe it'll happen this year, maybe it won't. But to say it's not up to the standard, this is the standard. There's seasons like this, those years I just mentioned. But Trevor Thompson says Izzo screwed up Hogard after taking 14 shots against Michigan. Izzo said he was taking too many shots following games 5 and 6. Then he didn't want him driving inside, but that saved them against USC and Marquette. That's a good point. I think that there is conflicting signs there. And I've seen it at practice when they've discouraged shots from Hogard here and there. But Hogard, like you said, against USC and Marquette, he was tremendous, with a few shots here and there and some drives. So I don't disagree with you about that. All right. Drew Murray says, is Michigan State still capable of making a run? I would say still capable. I would say don't shut the door on them. There are elements in place, but they got to get all the cats herded. I've used other metaphors. Got to get the screws tightened, got to get their crap together, and that's still a work in progress. I'm not guaranteeing. I'm not as bullish on the possibility of that happening this year as I was last year when Michigan State was going through some of the exact same struggles. And that I will consistently reject that. Anyone who says Michigan State's had a bad 4 years, where the F were you last March? I don't care. It's good to win a Big Ten title or a Big Ten tournament. That's good. You hang a banner. If you don't win the Big Ten tournament, then it's all about the NCAA tournament, or the Big Ten season. Then it's all about the NCAA tournament. And anytime you're in the Sweet 16, I don't care. That's a good season. It's not a great season. It's a great season for some programs. It's a good season. And you're in overtime almost to the Elite goddamn 8. Excuse my language. You're in overtime close to getting the Elite 8. And people want to say that that's a bad season. F those people. Even if they're friends of mine. That's stupid. Who else was in that category? Kansas, maybe? Duke in the past. No one else in the country would be like on the cusp of Elite Eight, maybe Kentucky, but Calipari's on the hot seat. They've not been very far in a long time, right? They lose to St. Peter's again? I can't remember. I disrespectfully disagree with that. I think that's ignorant. All right, what do we have here? I think that's all the questions. All right, no, we got some more football here. Desert Sparty from Ahwatukee, Arizona says, who do I have for the Super Bowl? I don't know. I didn't watch the Chiefs-Bills game, but I'll go with the Chiefs because of the quarterback. I don't really know. Mulalabe from Gladwin, Michigan says, Jim, what do you think is the one component missing the most for Michigan State basketball this season? Many think Izzo is losing his touch, or that this collection of players does not have the intestinal fortitude to win games. What's your take? Good question. Intestinal fortitude, if that's also focus and urgency, I would agree. They need to prove that they can stay locked in and execute and not throw one-arm passes and, help on a triple team and be aware of where Christie is as a shooter. Things like that. Those little things, they're not good enough to be sloppy on those and expect to win games and go far in March or get into March. So if that's intestinal fortitude, yes. I'm not sure they've got that. They need to prove that they do have that. I think when things get really severe, I think that they will tap into it and they'll get those things done. But they're running out of chips. And I think I just covered all that. I've talked about that previously in the podcast tonight. I've been using some bad language tonight. I apologize for that. I might have even broken a commandment. I'm not proud of that. I might go back and edit that out. I'm not sure. All right. Spartan Fan 81 from Orange County, California says, what are you hearing about football players in winter conditioning? Good question. I've not heard anything lately. I heard initially that it was really hard and the players felt good about being challenged the way they were. I've not heard anything else since then. No news is not bad news. Somebody asked, it might have been Matt Latham, asked me what about the Michigan State hockey series this weekend? Prediction for it. I'm predicting a split. Great series. Rivalry, always been great. It's even turned up a notch, even more now. First two games, they split. Michigan dominated the first game at Munn. Next game at Yost, they dominated the first period, and Michigan State turned it around in the second period and dominated the rest of the game. It's one of the more strange games I've ever seen in college hockey. And, after the first game and a half, I thought, well, Michigan State just cannot play their game against Michigan. Michigan State's a quickness and finesse and skill and possession type of team, transition quick and all those things. But Michigan they've got skill and speed and all those things too. And Michigan State just could not play that style against them because Michigan was better at their own game than they were. However, Michigan State stayed with it, turned it around, and Nightingale said after the game, he said, hey, a lot of our guys were just kind of slapping around to the puck and not trying to actually play our game. He didn't think that Michigan State was playing their game. Getting possession, maintain possession, quickness, short area, all that stuff. And he felt once they realized they could do it, they went ahead and dominated the rest of that game. Michigan's coaches felt that Michigan made some mistakes, which they did. They lost an edge in their own zone, went in and scored. Had some giveaways. He felt that they gave Michigan State everything that Michigan State got. Did not give Michigan State a lot of credit for turning that game around. So there's beneath the surface, there's some spats going on there. So they play at Yost on Friday, and then they play in Detroit at the Dual D on Saturday. I think Michigan's more talented. I think Michigan State's got better goaltending. Hockey can be a funny sport. Pucks bounces one way or another. I'm just kind of expecting a split. I think Michigan's a little bit better. I think Minnesota's better. But in this sport, you can still sneak up and win tournaments and do a lot of damage. Maybe this team will prove me wrong. We'll have to wait and see. But it's going to be a great weekend of hockey. Unfortunately, I won't be able to go to either game. Michigan State plays basketball on Saturday. I got some stuff going on Friday. But we'll be keeping an eye on that over at SpartanMag.com. Great hockey weekend for sure. It's tomorrow, Friday. Tomorrow's game day. All right, Eric in Saginaw says, What's the over-under? He says he's got over-under at 6 on the number of true freshmen for Michigan State who burn their red shirt this upcoming football season, i.e. play more than 4 games. What's the over-under? I'm going to say under 6. I'm thinking Marsh plays. I think Pretzlaff probably plays. A couple of defensive backs. Maybe a running back. I think 6 is right around the number. I'm going to go a little bit under on that one. Oh, I'm sorry. Eric from Saginaw thinks March Pretzlaff, 2 defensive backs and running back. And I'm not sure if you said that or I said that. I don't think Beeler will play that. I think Eric says he thinks Beeler's going to play. I don't think so. Could be wrong. Now, there's only 20 true freshmen, 7 are offensive linemen, and you got those quarterbacks in there. So 13, if the 2 quarterbacks don't play and the offensive linemen don't, that leaves you with 13 guys. I think a couple of corners, I think Marsh, Pretzlaff, I agree with that. I'm going to put it at 5. Question 9, Solo from Westland, Michigan says, whose high school film was better, in your opinion, Derek Harmon's or Mike Shun-Beeler? Mike Shun-Beeler is the guy from Chicago Simeon that is committed this week. I'm going to say Harmon because he was just so massive at 330 pounds with big size, with big height to go with all that girth. And I just think that Harmon was more uncommon because it's harder to find guys of that size that can move like he could too. And I thought Harmon was the most underrated player in the state of Michigan that year, and maybe the most underrated player in the state of Michigan in a couple of years. He's ranked like number 27 in the state. I'm like, that's ridiculous. Mainly because he played a position which is hard to find players. Secondly, he's doing it with size and athleticism that is extremely hard to find, which that in itself makes you more valuable. It's like being a catcher in baseball who can also hit. There just aren't many guys like that. Defensive tackles, rare. I thought Derek Harmon should have been a top 15 guy in the state of Michigan easily, if not top 10. And it's proven it's bearing out that way. So Beeler has some good film. He's been real coached. He's coached real well. Having violent hands and arm over swim move. Good with a speed swipe. Good change of direction in space. That was with him on film at about 245 pounds. He says he's at 275 now. He's going to have to get bigger up near 290. He's got some athleticism now. Will he maintain that athleticism as he gets bigger? I assume so, but I still like Harmon a little bit better. But Mike Shun, I don't close the door on him making some noise. Michigan State's not recruited a lot in Chicagoland area in the last 10 years, but when they have gone into Chicago, a lot of them have been defensive linemen, and they've done well. You got Jacob Panashuk, Mike Panashuk, was that his name? And Deshaun Mallory. There's a couple others, maybe 1 or 2 others. They've not gotten a lot of Chicago guys, but Chicagoland does produce defensive linemen. Anton, 1999 for Waterford, Michigan says, all things considered, what is your opinion of the Michigan State recruiting philosophy and the first class put together by the new staff? Philosophy, inside out, I think it makes sense. I mean, they're not going to close their eyes on, good players that are attainable in Georgia, Florida, Texas, California. I think they're going to be doing more at California with Demetrius Martin. They've already shown that they've got more interest in Houston than they've had in the past, sending Courtney Hawkins down there. I think that's a good move. In the meantime, they're not turning a blind eye to in-state talent or Ohio talent. I thought that was a mistake by the previous staff. I thought that Michigan State a lot of times tried to jump over dollars to pick up dimes. Well, I'm not going to say that because I don't think they wanted dimes either. But I think there's a hybrid to all of that. I thought the previous staff was noble and trying to sell the Michigan State brand there for a couple of years, thinking they could go out and get 4 stars and compete against anybody. I think it proved that you have to win a lot of games before you can do that. And some of the 4 stars that they got, some of the ones that they bought, were some 4 stars that maybe some of the other blue bloods kind of passed on. So I think all of it. I think you have to have your ear to the ground. You have to have your ear to the ground really strongly in Michigan and Ohio and even Indiana, Illinois, Pennsylvania, a little bit New Jersey, Virginia, Florida, Georgia, Texas, California. And by some chance, if you find out that you've got a real good chance to get someone from Arizona, after you've looked at all the other film, have at it. But I think the philosophy is sound and strong. It's hard to blanket recruit all 50 states all the time. You have to make wise use of your time, and I think they're doing that. I think they're pragmatic and resourceful. I think the philosophy is good. And a lot of recruits And their parents have been impressed with Jonathan Smith, the down-to-earth nature of who he is. He's just being who he is, and I think it resonates. And if they ever start winning, I think it'll resonate even more. I think there's high school coaches in Michigan and Ohio that have been happy to see Michigan State recruiters back in their hallways. That's good. That's how you get tipped off about certain players here and there. Every little check mark helps. As far as what do I think about the recruiting philosophy, okay, and the first class. The first class, the class is ranked number 43 in the country, and I've said this a number of times, and a lot of you know what I'm going to say right now. But I said, over the years, anything in the top 45 is workable. Top 10 recruiting class is big. That's a big deal. It's hard to do. It means something. And we saw a run of national champions that had like at least 2 top 10 classes. Didn't happen this year. Top 15 means something. Top 20 means something. Top 25 means something. Each of those mean more and more. But a lot of that is predicated on, how good was your evaluation? How much did you fill your needs? Did you have a high-ranked recruiting class because you have 8 defensive backs, but you didn't sign any defensive tackles? Michigan State's kind of been that way a little bit the last couple of years with Tucker. I'm exaggerating, but you have to be broad-based on things. I think they probably thought they could do things with the portal, and that didn't work out too well, defensive tackle. So, top 25 class means something, and I've been saying for 20 years that you show me a recruiting class that's ranked number 26 in the country and a recruiting class that's ranked number 44 in the country, and I have trouble telling the difference. Now, if I looked at Michigan State's class and you pulled up the 27th class, maybe I would say 27 might be better, 26 might be a shade better. 4 years from now, it might not look that way, but there's not much difference between 26 and 45. If you're in there, you probably won some recruiting battles. You probably did a pretty good job. I compare that to the actual football rankings during the season. 25 teams having a good year. Then you see also receiving votes. Down there and also receiving votes, that's essentially teams ranked from 26 to 35 or 36, however many received votes. Those are programs, usually they're having pretty good seasons, but just not great, but they're all about equal, and they're all capable of beating number 19 or number 20 or number 22, right? That's what it is. So if you're in there, you got a chance. D'Antonio's classes were all in that top 45 range. John L. Smith's first class, they had like 5 weeks to put that class together. He was hired late. A lot of the players were gone, and they had a class that was ranked like number 60-something, and that class was not a good class, and it didn't produce well for 4 years. When Jonathan Smith was hired and had 3 weeks to put a recruiting class together with no really pull in the Midwest, unlike D'Antonio. When D'Antonio was hired, he had 6 weeks to put a class together. He'd been recruiting at the University of Cincinnati, so he already had contacts in Michigan and Ohio and was able to go out and get players, Kevin Pickelman, Chris L. Rucker, Greg Jones, and put together a class. Kirk Cousins. So, with Jonathan Smith coming in with less time and without that just press go Midwestern contacts, I said at the time, if he has a class that's ranked in the top 50, that would be a really good recruiting job. If you salvage a top 50 recruiting class this year, I don't think they're going to be able to do it, but that would be a really good recruiting class. Well, they went out and did it. And after they got Micah Shun-Beeler and Brown, the wide receiver from Texas, and I'm not sure where Brown, I think Brown's film is real good. I'm not sure where his ranking is. I'm kind of hoping people took another look at his film and added that into the rankings. I'm not sure. But Michigan State's class right now is number 43 in the country in the On3 rankings. I didn't think that was, I would not have thought that would have been, I'm not going to say it would have been impossible, but I'm impressed by that. I thought they did really well. In 3 weeks to have a number 43 class. Pretty solid. You might not think top 50 is a big deal in recruiting, and it's not great, but it's not bad. You can win there. I heard a couple of weeks ago that Syracuse had their first top 50 class, I think last year. It was like the first top 50 class since like 2014 in like 10 years. I know Syracuse is not a blue blood, and they've really fallen on harder times, but that's a team that was happy to have a top 50 class. You look at the Oregon State rankings; they had trouble getting to the top 50. Now, a lot of times they're recruiting out west, and those players are underrated. And recruiting rankings are not the end-all, be-all. They're less accurate than a weather forecast, but I do think that it's a barometer worth paying attention to. And if you're consistently recruiting in the 60s, you probably have a problem. If you're consistently recruiting in the top 30s and you're giving enough attention to all the position groups, then you've got a chance to do you've got some material to work with. From there, okay, well, how good was your evaluation for those guys? And then how good is your player development going to be? And then game day prep, game week prep, game day, all those things go into it. But recruiting class number 43 in the country, pretty good. Excellent, I would say, considering they had 3 weeks to do this. Now they added 2 late, and they went after some others and didn't quite get the others done, but solid. Pretzlaff, I think getting Brady Pretzlaff was solid. Good middle linebacker type. He'll be good in the Rossi system. Nick Marsh, good, hanging on to him. Strong hands, 6'3", need a big receiver. He's got that. Defensive tackle, they tried to flip Brewu, the guy from Ohio, ended up signing with Pittsburgh. Tried to go after Dimitri Nicholas. Academics just didn't line up. So they need defensive tackles. The hardest position to recruit, probably. And it bears it out in this recruiting class. Tucker had trouble recruiting that position. Michigan State's got some guys that might move into that position, but they tried to make a few things happen here late and didn't quite get it done there. So defensive tackle is going to continue to be something probably in the portal they look at and in recruiting going forward as they get the program established. Offensive line, got 5 of them. All offensive linemen are projects to an extent, right? The Lesniewski guys, I liked their senior film a lot. The one Lesniewski guy I liked better than the other. I think it was Charlton I can't remember which one I liked better. But then I watched their senior film. On junior film, I liked one better than the other. Senior film, they were both good. I like those guys. The guy from Hawaii, I don't know. But then I looked back at the offensive lineman they had at Oregon State, and I went back and looked at their high school film, and I was like, I don't know. But they saw something in those guys, and they turned them into excellent offensive linemen as part of a great offensive line. So they know what they're doing. And when it comes to offensive line evaluation, it's difficult because you're looking at somebody at their 17-year-old film, and you're trying to project what they're going to look like when they're a 22-year-old man. That's difficult. They're all projects. Plus, offensive linemen, they just kind of get these upper body injuries. They just kind of wear out because you have to hit to get that position group square, and you'll get attrition there. So you need to recruit a good number of them. Throw them in the talent pool and see who sticks. At running back, I think Frazier looks good. The kid from Texas, 1 cut between the tackles, physical. Underrated. They need, Michigan State's got a lot of running backs in the program, but I think that some of those guys might be falling through the cracks. Some of those guys, it's an important spring. It'll be an important spring for Jalen Berger, important spring for Barber, and important spring for Prim. All 3 of those guys need to prove that they can hang. Tight end, Michigan State trying to retool there, bring in Jack Velling. That's good. And I've mentioned before that I think Wyatt Hook is underrated. And if there's 100 players in the state of California better than him, then they must be a lot of great players out there because he looks like a really good tight end, especially for the future as it gets stronger. So I think I think that defensive tackle they didn't quite. If they'd have flipped to Brewu, that doesn't guarantee Brewu is going to be really good, but you need to have some. You need to strengthen and bolster that talent pool. Defensive tackle, and Michigan State's lacking there right now. That's why it's called a rebuilding process. Question 11, John from Fenton, Michigan, and also Bradenton, Florida says, Jim, which coaches are responsible for recruiting Florida? Do you know if they are planning any visits? If so, what schools do they plan to visit? They've been in the hallways here in January, and I don't off the top of my head which schools. There'll be more in the spring also, but the guys that have been down there thus far, Keith Bonifa, the running backs coach, and the defensive line coach, Legi Suiaunoa. Great name. I'm going to get that right here real soon. Great name. And both those guys are really well-respected recruiters, and I don't know if they've recruited a lot in Florida in the past, but they're fired up to get down there. I've heard that, and those guys will represent Michigan State well. So we'll keep our ear to the ground heading into the spring evaluation period in terms of which schools Michigan State's going to be hitting up down there. Good question, though. Eric from Saginaw says, what's the over-under for the amount of inland lake walleye you will catch this upcoming fishing season? The over-under is half of a fish. I hit Lake Erie for the walleye quite a bit, hoping to do that more this year. My nephew hit Saginaw Bay. I've never gone out there with him. I'd like to sometime. But my nephew also has some secrets on some inland things that I've not tapped into. So this year, I'm going to get on the board there real soon. But got nothing in the works right now. The over-under on whitefish, I'm hoping is going to be 5, but it won't be inland lakes. I got to get it with my brother-in-law up around Grand Marais at a certain juncture. So I'll keep you posted on that one. I've never done that before, but I hear that's the thing. Grand Marais, it's way, let's see. It's Lake Superior. Jamo from Milwaukee says, Milwaukee's a real nice Great Lake city, by the way. He says, if Michigan State basketball is going to turn a corner and make a run this March, which is the single most important factor? Does he say improving rebounding? Praying one of our centers turns into an offensive threat? 3, having more consistent guard play from guards not named Tyson Walker? Or 4, having at least one of our freshmen elevate their game down the stretch? He says, which one is the single most important? I'm going to say 3, having more consistent guard play. Decision-making and staying in tune and getting those cats herded. Akins and Hogard. I think that's the most important. Rebounding would be great, but I think guard play is more important. Having a center become an offensive threat, probably not going to happen. And if it did, I don't know how much impact that would make. But Kohler has the capacity to provide a spark and provide a punch and provide some offense that they've not had all season. And that truthfully, he's not done in his whole career, but he's got the ability. If he can stay solvent on defense, that can change a lot on offense. Not that he will be a 30-minute guy, but the team could change a lot if all of a sudden Kohler can play 20 minutes and give you 10 points. And I think that's possible. I'm not predicting it, but I'm not closing the door on it. Still bears watching. Having freshmen elevate their game, possible. Cohen Carr, just in terms of horsepower stuff. Booker, I'm not closing the door on that. In December, I thought no chance. October, I thought no chance. 12 months ago, I thought no chance. 18 months ago, I thought no chance. Had too far to go. He's come a ways, and they're working on him. Today, they were doing some things, and Izzo was really watching him, and they're working on him. I don't close the door on that. He is getting better. And it could have given him 10 minutes, maybe. I don't know, though, man. It's still be trial by fire, and these games coming up are going to be hot. So it's like I said, they've been painted into a corner. They have very few games to work with because you're playing a 20-game Big Ten season, so you have fewer non-conference games to really work on, guys. You lose these games, and you have to win games, and you're in close games. You're painted into a corner, having to win games. You got 40 minutes, and you cannot afford to play a lot of minutes in some of these guys. Carr, starting this weekend, maybe a little bit more. It's going to be tight, but I don't close the door on it because Izzo does work with everybody all year, including the freshmen, and he has had some seasons in which freshmen have all of a sudden, boom, looked different from about Valentine's Day on. 2020, Anna Gagne looked different late in the year as a freshman. 2003 was one of the best examples. Struggled all season, got in late February, got into March, and all of a sudden, boom, Erasmo Lorbeck, Paul Davis, Maurice Ager, freshman out of nowhere. Boom, different players, team was different. Elite Eight almost beat Texas in the Elite Eight down in San Antonio. Almost got a Final Four out of nowhere, and the freshmen looking far different in March than they did in January. It's happened before. I mention this every year. Other examples, Draymond Green. 2009. Wasn't playing much early in the year. 8 minutes, 10 minutes, 12 minutes, 10 minutes, 10 minutes. Came off the bench late January, February, March. Key player in the run to the Final Four in 2009, beating Louisville in the regional final in Indianapolis. Was it the next year? 2010 when Lucas got hurt and Corey Lucius hit some big shots. Or did Lucius hit the big shots against Louisville? Maybe Lucius hit the big shots against Louisville. It wasn't a lot of points, but it was like 2 key 3-pointers. Like late in the first half. But anyway, another guy that wasn't doing much, and then March, boom, made some things happen. Marvin Clark, freshman, in and out. Regional final against Louisville at the Carrier Dome in Syracuse. They don't win that game without Marvin Clark stepping up, making some big plays. These are freshmen that came on strong. I think that was the year. But so I'm not closing the door on Cohen Carr and Xavier Booker doing something like that. Booker's coming along. I don't know. He's not there yet, but he's coming along. So I don't think that's the key thing, the key single most important factor like you listed, but it's on the radar. And that's the last question. I appreciate all the questions thus far. Mr. Bowman says, UConn has taken Michigan State's spot as a blue blood. I give UConn credit for winning national titles. I mean, when they get a chance to win a national title, they finish it. I mean, the year with Kevin Ollie, that was the Elite Eight year, right? When Michigan State had Keith Appling injured and all the things I just mentioned about New York City. And that's great. And hey, I'm not being a whiner because Michigan State's got eight or nine Final Four banners. And I'm just saying that if Michigan State had played Connecticut that year in Indianapolis, Michigan State would have won and went to the Final Four, might have won the national title. Credit to UConn, they got it done. What I like about UConn is they always have real great rim protection and size. Michigan State did beat UConn in the Final Four in Detroit in 2009. UConn, to their credit, they won national titles last year. That's all true. But you would not have said that 12 months ago. 12 months ago, for your UConn fan, you would have been calling for Danny Hurley's job. Because his first 2 years didn't go to the tournament. Next year, one and done. Next year, one and done. And in year 5, they were 5-5 in the Big East in January, and his job was on the line. Now, they won a national title, and they're number 1 in the country right now. But I'm just telling you, 12 months ago, you never would have said that. So how blue is that blood? Well, they found a good one in Hurley, and we'll see if he stays there and all that type of stuff. And to their credit, they get a chance, and they finished. And last year, they got in the tournament, and they won every game by double digits. But the last team to beat UConn last year, they did not win the Big East tournament. They lost to Marquette. Michigan State beat Marquette. If Marquette had played UConn again, I think Marquette would have beaten UConn again. So, blue blood, schmoosh-mud, whatever. Tom Farkman says, I think Michigan State will lose to Michigan and Ann Arbor. I don't disagree with that. That's going to be a road Big Ten game that's going to be very difficult. We will see how many Michigan State fans are there. They'll need some Michigan State decibel levels to help see that through. Hey, Doug McDaniel's a good player, and Michigan's got talent. And if they stay on the tracks, they're pretty good. I mean, they really gave Michigan State a really tough run for about 25 minutes at Breslin Center. Then they quit. But they're front runners, and if they're going okay, they can play well. Trevor Thompson says, I agree, Comp. You might want to edit the swearing. Couch sounds unprofessional on podcast. Tim Stout is not a fan of it either. I was taught if you swear to emphasize a point, you can't communicate. I don't disagree with that. You're right. It's my bad. I apologize. I just fouled out. And I swear 3 times in this podcast. I went like 7 years without swearing. But once, on the air. But there have been a few times when I've warned people that I'm going to swear, and then I go ahead and try to drive home a point. But you're right. I shouldn't do that. And I accept that. Tom Farkman says, MSU is just missing seniors. Izzo needed to hit the portal. And I don't disagree with any of that. Point well taken. Anyway, that's going to wrap it up. I shouldn't swear so much. I apologize for that. Said a couple bad words. I feel bad. I'll try not to do that next time. Appreciate everybody checking in and listening and having a good time with us here at SpartanMag Live. I'm having trouble shutting this thing off right now. Let me see if I can get that button. There it is. There's the button. Appreciate all the support and the questions and the massive donation in the tip jar. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. And go over to SpartanMag.com for coverage throughout Friday and into the weekend. Michigan State football, basketball, some hockey, recruiting always. SpartanMag.com, Underground Bunker. Go check it out. We think that you will like it. Thank you for the support. Thank you for the likes. Thank you for subscribing to the channel. And again, if you're still watching, go to SpartanMag.com, become a subscriber. We'd love to have you over there. We'll see you next time. Have a great weekend. Thanks, everybody. Sorry about all the swearing. I'll try to do better next time. Thanks a lot. Have a great weekend.